Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're your gruesome twosome, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And after a few technical difficulties, we're finally on the air.
Yeah, it's almost like God doesn't want us to engage in this podcast.
In this unholy, secular, disgusting podcast we're about to get into.
Which we're then going to criticize the secularism of the content.
Well, I think the fact that we're talking about these movies is in and of itself a secular blasphemy.
Yeah, I guess so.
How not only how these movies eschew the real spirit and message of Christmas, but also are absolute garbage fires of cinematic proportions.
One actually far more than the other. Believe it or not.
Yeah. So our movies today, get excited, fun stuff. Christmas with the Kranks from 2004 and Deck the Halls from 2006. We wanted to pair these movies because in my memory, they kind of easily were in theaters at the same time. They're just two very lamebrained, stupid 2000s comedies, and we explored 2000s comedies a little bit last time with Wedding Crashers, but specifically like Christmas, family. Oh, yeah. Let's all get in the minivan with our Bush Cheney stickers from 2004 and drive on down to the Cineplex and see what new garbage awaits us, basically. And so, again, I remember seeing both of these movies as a kid. They didn't particularly make a great impression on me even then, so you best believe they're not going to be all that great now.
But, yeah, I mean, this was the era of these movies we just talked about. This movie, Yours, Mine, and Ours. Do you remember what Dennis
I never
Quaid?
Did see that.
I
don't think, but I do remember that.
I went to the theater.
The
to
Cheaper
see
by
that.
the Dozen movies.
Yeah,
also.
and so that's what I was gonna say is like it's the Cheaper by the Dozen movie. So it was all this like.
Are we there yet? Are we done yet?
Right. No, sadly not.
These are obviously Christmas movies, and again, we wanted to get into the Christmas spirit here at Overlapping Dialogue, and I don't know if this was the best we could have come up with. Certainly, I hope not. Let me just promise you, after two straight episodes of not so great movies, we actually will have some great things in the next episode. So don't worry,
because we're not going to have a whole lot to say on these. But.
Any takeaways right now, Levi, from the World Cup? This
morning, as of when we were recording this, the Netherlands beat USA. Argentina and Australia are playing currently. They're in the 25th minute, 0-0. Mm-hmm. So yeah, USA's out. I'm actually kind of happy about that fact, and I'll tell you why. Because there's been a lot of people that this happens every 4 years. It's just I'm witnessing it and paying more attention to it now more than ever since I'm into soccer, football now. More genuinely, is that what happens is basically people who don't care about this here in America, at all. They're like, oh, USA's playing. Oh, yeah, oh, big thing. And then when they lose, they're immediately out and gone, and you don't ever hear from them again. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh, good, we've already dealt with that. Kick those people to the curb. Let's just move on. Let's just get that annoyance out of the way. Because it's a bunch of people who never watch it, and they're aggravated while they're watching it, but still pulling for the USA because, number one, I guess they're white. I guess that's their main reason for pulling for them rather than them being America. And there's a, I mean, just inherently, we've been talking about a lot about this recently. There's a lot of inherent xenophobia to the dislike of soccer or football in America in general, and so that's a big part of that. So I'm just glad to see those people that we've lost, so those people go away.
And to be fair, the Netherlands is a really quality team.
Yeah.
They're expected to go far,
Yeah.
I believe, in the tournament. So best of luck to
I mean,
the-
sure, it would have
the
been
Dutch.
nice to have seen the USA win, but I don't care. We win everything else. It's just like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't give a crap. Like,
Again,
but
we've talked about
whatever.
this on the, if you listened, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade pod.
Yeah.
But that this is kind of a strange occurrence, anyways. That obviously the World Cup occurring this time of year, just normally in the summers.
Yeah, because it's usually easy for those people to ignore it because there's so much else going on in the summer.
Yeah.
But since this has taken so many primetime slots during American football season, during basketball season, all these seasons that are going on,
The holiday season,
yeah, and then the holiday season, that there's a lot of TV being watched more than there is in the summer, and so therefore, that's just inherently people are going to pay more attention to it. So we've seen, I think, a little bit more of an uptick of discussion on it this year than normal. Also, just a lot of the students that I have play soccer, so they're all into it. I'm more into it, so I feel like I've been paying more attention to it maybe, but I don't know. It just seems like this year in particular there's been a lot more like pro Team USA, screw everything else attitude.
Well, I know they didn't
with,
even
you
make
know.
it in the 2018 FIFA World Cup 4 years ago, and I think another thing is too is like maybe it's just that our women's team has consistently been far better than the male team, and so they've actually won some World Cups and gold medals and everything, and so maybe people come to it in an expectation that the guys are just as good when the record would back up that they're not exactly just yet.
Right.
So, but again, best of luck to all the countries out there. It's all about having fun, anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pulling for France vaguely. I guess Argentina, whatever. I don't really care. I mean, I just kind of want to see who wins out.
Yeah.
But I guess France, just because also there's been a lot of anti-French like stuff I've heard recently about, since I guess they've won in the past, and since everybody just hates the French, I don't know why.
It's just an easy, idiotic default American setting.
It's really stupid.
When again, the United States would not even exist if not for the French.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways,
yeah. Speaking of French,
yeah, get that French toast out because we gotta, you know it. We just gotta get into that blue plate special.
Hi, Audrey.
Mama, have a cup of coffee, please.
Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
Order's right here.
And back with
I'm
that.
just kind of lazy with that one today.
Why not?
Yeah.
So
Speaking of French, Sight and Sound list came out. We're going to talk about that for a while.
the British,
I guess.
the BFI
Well, no, but
sound
the
list,
reason I
yeah.
mentioned that is because there's the top movie on the list, which is Belgian. So, is there any reason I keep saying this? I guess because they speak French is what it is. But,
So, I think I don't know if we've really talked much about the 2012 poll on here, which was obviously 10 years ago, but it's a big deal in cinephilic circles. I guess that makes sense. That's a word, cinephilic, the circles of the cinephiles. Whenever BFI, which is of course the British Film Institute, every 10 years, Sight and Sound magazine issues a poll out to critics and filmmakers alike, where they're asked, what are your top 10, what are the top 10 greatest films? And this gets into a debate, anyways, before we even really get into what this latest list was, which is, of course, again, the 2022 edition. There won't be another edition of this until 2032. So, again, it only happens every 10 years, so that alone means it's important in its own way. But this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but in your own estimation, and it's hard to guess because every person who's doing this individually is going to have their own calculus, do we think people are giving their top 10 what they think are the, quote, best movies, their favorite movies, a list that makes them look cool. I mean, what are, I really wonder usually with, and this goes for end of the year lists in general too, what exactly goes into making a top 10 list, because very often it is this uncalculable combination for me of favorite and best whenever I'm making a list. And everybody can say, oh, I'm not trying to make this list to appeal or make me look cool or whatever, but especially in the world of people who are publishing online film criticism and online reviews, I can't help but think that has something to do with it, And so the new list came out. I'll just go through the top 10 here first, and we might talk about some other films that are further down.
Well, can I answer your question? You were kind of asking, I guess, that, I mean, to me, when I look at these lists, I mean, and can I just say personally that, and I'm not saying this to be negative, to be like, oh, I just totally don't care, but seriously, all the things going on in my life right now, and everybody's like, oh, the Sight and Sound list came out. Not anything I was A, anticipating, B, caring about, or C, even remembering was going to happen whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So when it came out and everybody was pissed off, I kind of just shrugged and was like, okay. This is not to say that it's not important, because I want to talk about, it's like when people say the Oscars aren't important. It's like, well, it clearly is, because they clearly are, because of just they're the Oscars. They, are a direct representation of what the viewing public sees of movies, is like an award version of that, I guess, and the way they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, I should go see that. So it's kind of a similar thing to this too, where people see these and they're like, oh, this is like, a big thing, or, oh, I've never heard of this, I should look that up, that sort of stuff. But that ultimately, though, with these lists, I think it's a combination of all those things you said. But I mean, you see stuff like 8.5, Citizen Kane, Vertigo, Tokyo Story, Seven Samurai, whatever. All these movies that have been on these lists for so long, Rules of the Game, whatever, are by the same people who have been around forever, like William Friedkin or Coppola or whoever, that have been asked these questions a million times, Scorsese, and continue to put the same stuff.
To briefly interrupt, this is what a lot of people would call the, quote, the canon. The canon is, of course, these films that have been recognized decade after decade as among the finest works of cinema that exist.
Yeah.
And that goes for any art form, literature, painting, whatever.
And so those are always going to be the same. You're always going to see those same movies on there. But I think that you're right in saying that now we're getting these, and I don't know who they ask. Are we even able to see who all has asked these questions and what the population of voters is? I don't really understand that.
They ask various critics. So some critics have then since came out and revealed what their lists were. Just some examples of some that are online. David Ehrlich, Bill Jabiri, I saw were two critics that had their polls. Let me just briefly actually read from the actual BFI's website of this. In 1952, the Sight and Sound team had the novel idea of asking critics to name the greatest films of all time. The tradition became decennial, increasing in size and prestige as the decades passed. The Sight and Sound poll is now a major bellwether of critical opinion on cinema, and this year's edition, its eighth, is the largest ever, with 1,639 participating critics, programmers, curators, archivists, and academics, each submitting their own top 10 ballot.
Well, these are people that are not filmmakers, is what you're saying.
No, because there is a separate director's poll, which is a whole other thing.
Oh, but you're saying so the people who vote in the main poll are all these people.
Critics, programmers,
oh, then that's what the problem is.
And academics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what the problem is because those people, because you see the director's poll, and that's always way more of a genuine thing.
Let me just briefly read on what it says about that.
Yeah.
Each decade since 1992, so they've only polled directors in the last several decades. Sight and Sound has completed its celebrated critics poll by formally sounding out the world's leading directors on the 10 films they believe to be the greatest of all time. Though it's always been global and inclusive in scope, the poll has expanded significantly each decade. In 1992, 101 directors voted. Fast forward to 2012, where 358 directors took part. This year, for the 4th edition of the poll, we received ballots from 480 directors. This electorate spans experimental, art house, mainstream, and genre filmmakers from around the world. In every case, the voter is a director of note.
Mm-hmm.
So,
how many they say they do for that?
480.
Okay.
For
So yeah, and I'm not gonna, and it gets kind of predictable though with directors, because I was gonna talk bad about them too, because I kind of have something bad to say about every aspect of this actually, and like I said, I don't try to be too negative, but with directors, I think it becomes so obvious to continue to say Citizen Kane 8.5, all those movies, right? You're gonna get that same list. For me, at least, and I am no filmmaker, but at least when I was more interested in possibly being a filmmaker, or just as a person who is interested in being creative in general, right? The art that has inspired me most is stuff like The Godfather, right? But then it's other random stuff too. So I mean, it's all about barometers, but it gets kind of stale after a little while when you look at these directors lists too, where you're just like, yeah, that's always on there, yeah. And it's not to say that Citizen Kane isn't one of the best movies ever made. It is. But I do think that there's a nature to say, oh, why don't we switch this up a little bit, include new things? But then that's when you get stupid lists like what we just got the other day from all these critics. And so that's where I think the problem is I think you're right, that I think it's a coolness attempt. Now, we can talk in a little bit about what Paul Schrader said about all this, and how kind of lame brain and idiot some of that was. But he's right about certain things in the sense, I think, that people are trying to appear a certain way when they make these lists. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact of it being what he called, what were the words he used?
Well, I'm going to read exactly from what he said a little bit. Let's first just go through the top 10. I'm going to
go ahead.
10 to 1. And I will say, I think in general it's a good thing that more critics were asked to submit
it's
lists.
always better.
You're going to get a more interesting list that way. But just by pure logistics of the list, it actually results in a lot of ties throughout the list. That's no criticism exactly.
Really make sense
That's
to me.
just, I think it literally goes by mentions. So it's not even like, oh, somebody who ranked Citizen Kane number 1 means it gets so many first place votes. It literally just goes by how many times was it mentioned in lists, just to clarify.
Right.
All right, so 10 through 1. Singing in the Rain. Number 9, Man with a Movie Camera. Number 8, Mulholland Drive. Number 7, Beau Travail. Number 6, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Number 5, In the Mood for Love. Number 4, Tokyo Story. Number 3, Citizen Kane. Number 2, Vertigo. And number 1, for the very first time ever, Jean Dillman.
23 Croix Commerce, 1080 Brussels.
Yeah, which most people just shorten to Jean Dillman for clarification. But yeah, that is the full title of the movie.
Right.
Let's just start with number 1 and it feels awkward talking about this because this is a movie neither one of us have seen. I've seen clips from it in film school. I've always wanted to see the movie.
Well, and I've seen J2LL, Chantal Ackerman, another Chantal Ackerman film, which I liked quite a bit, but yeah. So
that's number 1.
Yeah.
Now, I think the very first time they did this poll, Bicycle Thieves was number 1. And then every year after that until 2012, it was Citizen Kane. So Citizen Kane very famously held this title for a long,
Bicycle
long
Thieves even
time.
on this list?
I believe it is. I think it is towards the bottom. Or let's see real quick. Hold on just a second. But it is tied at 41st.
40. Okay.
So then in 2012, and I remember the glory days of this because I was in the middle of film school, and I remember when all this was bandied about and talked about a lot. Vertigo was number 1 all of a sudden, and that was, and let me just, with Citizen Kane and Vertigo, their critical reappraisals. Citizen Kane was generally liked when it came out, I believe, in the early 40s, but due to, Wells versus Hearst legal crap that happened, that it didn't exactly get buried, but it didn't exactly get the recognition that obviously people in subsequent decades have believed it deserved. But then, as the decades passed, it widely became known as one of the greatest, if not the greatest film of all time. Similar things have happened with Vertigo. That was a movie that was kind of generally disliked when it came out in 1958, from a director who was generally pretty beloved by the commercial public. But as Hitchcock's stock has risen over the years, as has Vertigo's. And so that was, I just kind of in my head, I didn't really know what I knew this was coming up soon, but I didn't really have any big, bold predictions about anything. I assumed Vertigo would hold the top spot. I just assumed that. But Jean Dillman taking the top spot, and not only taking the top spot, one of the more shocking elements of this was where it ranked in the last poll. So it went from, wait a moment. It went from number 34 to number 1. That's a huge jump. I mean, that's a very decisive jump. Now, again, it is slightly awkward to talk about a movie that neither of us have seen, even though we both know what it's about. But it just seems undeniable that there had to be, something going on to get it to this number 1 spot. I know when I first saw it, I was really like, wow, that's number 1, and I immediately started to jump through and think about how or why this happened. There was a Criterion release of it in the last so many years, and that's another thing, too. A lot of people have talked about that Criterion immediately had a playlist ready almost of like all the movies that they have on the list, and it was something in the neighborhood of like 50 or 60 movies they had already had sitting on the channel, which just speaks to, in many ways, to Criterion's influence as far as stirring the pot and deciding which films to spotlight, and over time what a Criterion release means to a movie, that it elevates it to this spot. And that was one of them that was on there. But also that it had apparently, another thought I had was, wait a minute, did this like have some big like retrospective festival circuit, where it was retrospective that it kind of had, and apparently that it did some years ago, and has been consistently been played in more art house influential circles within critics. And so all told, I guess in that ways, it's not surprising that it's number 1, but nonetheless, it's undeniable that it is still surprising it's number 1. Yeah. What do you account to kind of saying this is the number 1, the new number 1? And what does a, quote, number 1 Sight and Sound movie even mean?
I'll answer that first question, or the second question first, because part of me wants to go into, I'm just going to ignore the first question first. To me, I think it, first of all, it doesn't really mean it. Nothing of this means anything. It's like the Oscars. I mean, when you really start thinking about it, and I say this as someone who talks about movies constantly on a podcast that, I mean, gets adequate numbers to listen to from what I'm aware. But that none of this stuff matters, especially to average, everyday viewers. And believe me, people are stupid. Most people out there are stupid, and they are not going to watch things that challenge them or interest them or pique any sort of artistic enjoyment in their mind. Like, genuinely, that's just not going to happen. But what happens, though, after a certain point, when you get so inside baseball on this stuff, is stupid crap like this happens. And I'm gonna bang the drum for Citizen Kane, because no one's ever done that before, clearly. But you know why Citizen Kane is seen as one of the best movies ever made is because it marshals all of its style and its bravado to tell a story about people, right? About a certain person and what fame and money did to that person, and what and all those things.
Let me just briefly say about Citizen Kane specifically. Ostensibly, of course, Charles Foster Kane is the main character and subject of the movie. But you see all these other lives that are impacted by his and intersect with that. And so there's just a lot wrapped up into the story and the narrative of that movie that features so many varied characters.
Yeah, and so therefore that's why that scene is so great, is not just because of its style, not just because of that, because there is and emotional connection that happens by the end of that movie. I mean, undeniably. Now, I have not seen Jen Dillman, and I'd like to, and I don't want to speak too ill of it either because
in some ways, this happening to it is one of the worst things that could probably happen to the movie in terms of its reputation.
Because when you look at that movie, and interestingly, I'm always somebody who's always saying, no, we need to make movies that are more about real people, which that movie, it seems, is far more about real people than Citizen Kane was, because it was about a newspaper tycoon, and that's like a king, basically, and in relation to that, this Jen Dillman will be a far more realistic depiction of life, right? But at the same time, I know that movie is, like, I've always heard about that movie that it's very repetitive, that it's got all these scenes of her doing her morning routine over and over.
It's very intentionally like a slice of life,
right? And then at the very end of the movie, there's one thing that's done differently, and that people say that they're like, "Oh my God," when they see that, and like, without just outwardly laughing at the way that sounds, that people talk about that, because that just sounds inherently ridiculous to me. And I know that movie is supposed to be, like I said, about, like you were saying, a slice of life about real life, but it comes to a point where I don't want to sound too lazy or like basic, but it's like, but is that movie like that? Has that movie like for the world done anything really? And then transformed cinema. Kirsten Cinema in a big way, because Citizen Kane, whether people know it or not, average everyday people, has made a major impact on movies just in general. That isn't to say that, and I know, and the whole skew of it is flawed anyway, because it's based on mentions. It's not like the way they do polling, where it's like, I forgot what that's called, but like where it ranks
like
it by a preferential ballot or whatever. It's not like that. It's just like, oh, it got this many mentions on whatever. And it's like, well, maybe it was like lower down on everybody's. I mean, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what the like statistics on that were.
I would suggest though, probably if it got this many mentions to make it the clear number one, it probably ranked fairly high on a decent, like 5 or above, I would imagine, on people's,
which whatever. But I mean, I don't know. But I'm kind of jumping all over the place. But it's just to say that when I think of the best movie ever made, and to me, it's The Godfather.
I would agree. And let me just say, anytime I see a list that's greatest movies ever made and it's not The Godfather, I'm like, okay, who cares?
Right. And we've talked all about that, but that's a movie that, like we've said on our podcast about that, and like I just said about Citizen Kane, has all the style, has all the, the import that it does, but also is about an emotional journey of characters and people, and it feels like people that you know, and it's entertaining. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because movies is supposed to be entertaining. As much as I love movies that are very, movies are inherently made for entertainment. And for me, entertainment is not always what entertains other people, clearly. I mean, I showed my kids at school The New World a couple weeks ago. And let me tell you, they were way more into it than I was expecting. But there were a lot that were straight up angry at the movie. And were like, what was any of that? I don't care about that, whatever. So, obviously,
it's funny you should mention Terrence Malick, but we'll talk about that later.
Because the best movie that's been made in the past 30 years wasn't even on the list, so whatever. But that, like I said, I don't want to sound too basic on this or anything, but to me, it's just like, I doubt that movie is entertaining enough to be the best movie ever made, is all I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to sit there, and maybe I'll see it eventually, but I just personally doubt to myself that I would sit there after that long of a movie about what that's about and be like, oh, that's just one of the best movies ever made, when it was kind of just the same thing repeated over and over. And I know, like we keep saying, I haven't seen the movie. I know that it's probably way more than that, but just from the outset, that's what it looks like. And to go back to what Schrader had said, it does seem, and what we had kind of implied, it does seem like people are trying to be, I'm not going to say it the way he said it, but it does seem like people are doing this as like a ploy to be cool or to be interesting, is I'm going to put Jen Dillman on there. Because Chantal Ackerman, as a queer female filmmaker who committed suicide, there's a lot of different little things that people are going to say, oh, we want to put that on there because of all these little asterisks on her resume. Not even necessarily because it's a great movie, which it probably is. But
so anytime there's these big lists, whether it's AFI does a list, which I don't even know when they haven't done one in a while. I don't think they used to do some more regularly, but especially the BF, the British Film Institute, the canon of film.
Well, and that's like always way more open towards international.
Yes,
films,
and specifically the AFI is like they're more like, and I don't even think this is a bad thing necessarily. They're like, well, we're the American Film Institute. We're wanting to honor and recognize American film. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for somebody to do that. You know what I mean? But I do think it is better, frankly, that the BFI opens it up to world cinema. But there's been a lot of debates over the last, for forever, but particularly the last 20 years, ever since the internet, really, especially. What is the canon? And I'm not even talking about just film canon, all canons. This goes on with literature all the time. About how canons usually inherently have a tendency or a bias to honor white men.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been a lot of backlash in recent years to canons that favor that system or favor that bias and want to, only prop it up. Like you said, there's a lot of these movies that are amazing movies. We love a lot of these movies.
But
you see them again, you see them on these lists again, there is like a, okay. Even when Vertigo, made by, as it turns out, a white man, even when it was number one, that was a semi-shocking moment.
Yeah.
I mean, a shocking moment in and of itself because, Citizen Kane's now number 2. I guess Citizen Kane is no longer the greatest film of all time. As if any one person can definitively say that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, and, more and more as I get older, I'm now 30 years old, can you believe that? I am just
James Bond's gun. You know that.
I'm just really kind of wary about list making in general. We even talked about maybe doing our own top 10 of what we would do, but then I stopped and think, you know what? It'd be a version of what Levi said. It would be the same. So many movies, you know what I mean, but I also don't want to put things on a list just to be shocking and different because I want to be honest with what I think.
Right.
But guess what? I'm a white man.
Mm-hmm.
This turns out I'm a straight white man, and so I have to admit to an extent to being part of a bias that exists of what movies have been appealed and made for me, which is most of American cinema. Yes,
yeah, that's like specifically. So
if you were to tell me Gene Dillon would be the '70s movie that would be the first '70s movie that's number one, I'd be kind of shocked. In its own way because I would expect it would be. Nashville, not on the list. Apocalypse Now, maybe a Godfather, a lot of things that I really love and really admire. Now, so I have to admit to being part of
Chinatown also wasn't on this list.
Being part of the very bias that does not, that at this point in my life, I've not even seen this movie. Although, hypothetically, I easily could have, but I haven't. So in its own way, frankly, it's for me a kick in the pants of, I need to see this. And so I think this being number one, as I said earlier, is unfortunately one of the worst things that could happen for it because it instantly people who are not interested in seeing foreign films or not interested in seeing things that are a little more arty or independent or outside of the traditional Hollywood structure are going to be more inclined to say, well, what is this? A Belgian French speaking movie about a woman for 3.5 hours who just goes about her daily chores and is boring and is monotonous.
Yeah.
What's the point of that? And so I think that's unfortunately something that happens. But this is where everything I said, I want you to really take into account because I believe. But when coupled with a lot of other things you see on this list, leads us to ask some fundamental questions about what the, quote, metrics of valuing cinema are in the year 2022, because it would seem as though that for all the justified and righteous and true things that have been said about the canon, right? The canon's too white male-centric, it's too maybe American-centric or Western-centric, we need to expand it out. I think what we see, though, ultimately with this list is an overcorrection. And what overcorrections are, in their own ways, are attempt to maybe steady or, if not tear the canon down, to revise the canon, to say, well, this is what the canon is in 2022.
Yeah.
Well, some of these movies making it onto this list are downright shocking, especially some of the recency bias a lot of people have claimed is on this list.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through some entries here in a little bit, but I'm frankly shocked that some of the movies that are on here that are as recent as they are. One that has gotten a lot of conversation is Portrait of a Lady on Fire at number 30, a movie that we both love.
Yes.
I would say unabashedly, unreservedly. That movie came out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is a question to ask you too, and I've said a lot of things, so feel free to respond to any of those. But just, if nothing else, answer me this: is there like a time where we can start to consider whether or not a movie is officially one of the greatest films of all time? I think we could both agree 3 years is a little bit brief of amount of time.
As William Friedkin told, once said to our old friend Nicholas Winding Refn about him saying that Drive was a great movie, he was saying, that movie's been out for however many years it was at the time. It was like 5 or 6 maybe, and he's like, that's like a pimple on the eye hole of time, whatever. Both men who are incredibly arrogant, ridiculous people, by the way, must say. But that, I don't think there should be such a rigid,
like it has to be 10 years old.
Yeah,
or
but what's easy is then what you do is just don't pay attention to lists like this because they're just inherently ridiculous. So it's like there's no rules, but then it's easy to just not pay attention because there are no rules. And then
Moonlight
on
tied
there
at number 60. Yeah. Get Out from 2017 tied for 95th, towards the very bottom of the list, along with The General. Buster Keaton and Get Out just sitting alongside each other. General and that is kind of shocking. Black Girl,
Where's the Calls? Tropical Malady is pretty high up there too.
Yeah, from 04. Black Girl, Once Upon a Time in the West, and A Man Escaped, all 95. Let's see. Blue Velvet. I don't remember on the last list if Blue Velvet was on there. So that was tied for 84. I know. Mulholland Drive shot up quite a bit. It's now in the top 10.
That's a more Summer Day movie. Is on there, which would be one of my major picks towards the top.
Matter of Life and Death tied at 78 along with that. Actually tied at 78. Celine and Julie Go Boating, Matter of Life and Death, Modern Times, A Brighter Summer Day, Santiago,
Satan
Tango, excuse me. Sunset Boulevard. Interestingly, Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro are both side by side. Those
it
two
might even, It's
directors,
almost like somebody did just come all up with this on their own and just put stuff there, and
Yeah. Casablanca's 63.
Yeah, but anyway, no, there's no way that we can say no to those things, but also they are so inherently ridiculous that they're. I don't know what the answer is.
To speak to this
but
point,
it's like no, and none of those movies are even in the top great of whatever. I don't know.
Let's talk about what Schrader said here. He's famously a Facebook poster.
Yes,
just hilarious.
That very much fits his demographic. So,
I'm just going to read what he says here.
Old angry white man.
This is Paul Schrader. For 70 years, the Sight and Sound poll has been For 70 years, the Sight and Sound poll has been a reliable, if somewhat incremental, measure of critical consensus and priorities. Films moved up the list, others moved down, but it took time. The sudden appearance of Jane Dillman and the number one slot undermines the SNS's poll's credibility. It feels off, as if someone had put their thumb on the scale, which I suspect they did. As Tom Stopper pointed out in Jumpers, in democracy, it doesn't matter who gets the votes, it matters who counts the votes. By expanding the voting community and the point system, this year's SNS poll reflects not a historical continuum, but a politically correct rejiggering. Ackerman's film is a favorite of mine, a great film, a landmark film, but it's unexpected.
I can hear him saying all this, by the way. A great film, a landmark film.
But it's unexpected number one.
Now, it sounds like Giovanni Ribisi doing an impression of Paul Schrader. It's a great film. I mean,
Somehow Contraband's not on here. Anyways, let me keep going.
Well,
but it's
my iPhone place, but yeah.
But its unexpected #1 rating does it no favors. Gene Dillman will, from this time forward, be remembered not only an important film in cinema history, but also a landmark of distorted, woke reappraisal. And then later on, some people were going at him in the comments, and he was saying some stuff. Somebody said, "Oh, for F's sake, Paul, not you too. Unconscious gender bias has influenced this poll for decades, and now many, mostly men, are crying about it when a more diverse group is invited to vote, and it tilts a bit the other way, ... And then he responded to that. Gender bias has influenced this poll, quote, for history, because it has influenced the history of art, quote, for history. You can't change history with a poll. I agree with that.
Yes.
What he just says about that. There is truth to that. This is where we're going to have to think here.
Yeah.
So Jack Hanley, a guy commented, I'm a bit confused because it seems from your stopper delusion that you have long made peace with the fact that the scales are tipped by the members who wield the power to do so. So is your real argument and fear the realization that it is no longer the exclusive domain of older white men of privilege who do so? Schrader responded to that. The notion of the canon is based on history, and if the history of film is predominantly male and white, so be it. A lot of people on film Twitter have screenshotted that and are taking issue with that. What do you, in general, think about? We've talked about Paul Schrader recently in the past, but somebody of a certain subsection who has movies he has worked on represented on this very list was, say, like Taxi Driver. What do you take away from his comments?
Well, my favorite thing about this is that you can assumedly get the writer of Taxi Driver on the horn at any point, and he will reply on Facebook to. And I just think that's hilarious, personally. Other than that, I don't have much to add. But that, what was your original question? I'm sorry, because I just was obsessed with that.
Just
fact.
What do you take away from those comments? Well, because again, I think there are kernels of this is what is problematic and about things today is that. Now, I'm not going to go as far as the idiot like Kanye West saying, "Oh, Hitler had some good ideas." That's the biggest red flag in history is when you start saying that.
Yeah. When Alex Jones looks like the sane individual in the conversation.
But it is unfortunate when we come to a conclusion where you can look at all the things he said, and I think he's mostly wrong about some things he says.
Yeah.
But he does have a broken clock can be right twice a day. I think the whole idea of specifically the first comment back I had read about, what was it? Art has historically favored white men. Now, that is not necessarily a reflection of art in general, but it is a reflection on how we categorize and rank art, which in of itself, ranking art is in of itself a bad line of work to be in because, it's just, how can you compare this to that on an artistic lens? Let's just say that the movies today will not be making any sight and sound lists anytime soon. But
unless it were like an opposite version.
Yeah, like maybe worst films ever.
Because I'm just going to go ahead and say Deck the Halls is literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen. So,
it's certainly going to be the worst movie we've talked about on this pod.
Which is surprising that Christmas with the Cranks is like, oh, wow, a throwback to movies.
But he's saying that I love this movie, but why is this number one? There has to be a rationale and a reasoning. In the same way, Vertigo being ranked number one over Citizen Kane was in and of itself a statement of this is what our values of cinema are now. Well, 10 years later, and I think the 10 years between 2022 and 2012 are far more large than what even 2002 and 2012 would have been, because largely we do have more women and people of color now writing about movies, which without reservation is a great thing.
And
right?
I think without reservation, it's great that we're getting this diversity of critics to say these things. And I am fine with the fact that it is that, because ultimately, guess what? I don't care what the list is. I'm interested in it only slightly. But no, I mean, if we're going to get a stupid pick like that, but it comes at the cost of having more diversity in picking, then yeah, whatever, we should have more diversity of thought on this, and it should be younger people making these decisions.
Well, also, what's going to happen is, too, and I don't think enough people are saying this, all these young critics now, guess what's going to happen? They're going to get older. And those tastes are going to change a little bit.
Yeah.
These tastes are not set in stone or in time. I mean, they're going to
and
evolve.
some of these movies
and
are going to
change.
disappear from the list. There's going to be movies that'll never be back on there. I mean, eventually, you know.
Let's just talk about some of the highest debuts, movies that had not been on the list, period, and then are now on the list. Cleo from 5 to 7, which, of course, Agnes Varda has seen a huge
especially
bump in recent years.
Well,
you know.
there was a Criterion set. She passed away. There was that documentary she was in. There's been a lot of stuff, so
Meshes of the Afternoon was number 16.
that I find so fascinating personally because it's just like that movie's first of all a short film, which not that I'm quibbling over that, but it's just like, have you seen that movie, by the way?
No, I haven't.
I did in film school, and it's actually quite good and interesting. But if you see that movie, you'd laugh and think that's number 16.
Well, it went from nothing to 16
right,
on
it's
the
just
list.
like, okay.
Do the Right Thing, which I was very happy to see was on the
yeah.
list. I don't know where I would rank it, but the
Was
fact
Malcolm
that it
X
needs
on
to-
there anywhere?
I don't think so.
Okay.
no. But I'm glad that's on
Oh,
the list.
yeah, sure.
Daisies, 28.
That has seen a big bump because it got a Criterion release. And just in general, I've seen it feels like the Czech New Wave has just been a lot bigger the last so many years. I don't really know
Portrait
why.
of a Lady on Fire. We can talk about this a little bit. It going from, obviously it wasn't even made.
A very special friendship.
yeah. We love this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It really spoke to us. Is it the 30th best film of all time? No. And again, I think that's doing that movie a disservice to throw it like that up there, because then all of a sudden there's going to be people that are like, why is this on there? I don't like that. Blah, blah. And there's been a lot critical backlash to that movie in the last few years anyways, and this has been a slight bump in that. Killer of Sheep, awesome movie. That should have been on there anyways. I don't know why it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's not my favorite Charles Burnett movie, but it is great. So, yeah, sure.
Wanda, which I've still yet to see, number 48. The Piano, number 50.
Jane Campion, just in general, has seen a big bump as well.
News from Home, 52.
That's another Ackerman film.
The Apartment, 54. Wasn't even on the list before, right? And there's been talk that Wilder has among the most number of films on this list. He's like a director that has maybe 3, I think.
Laughable.
No, The Apartment's not laughable. I think we would agree The Apartment
No, that should be higher than that.
Yeah, but that's his best film.
Right, oh, yeah.
Daughters of the Dust, number 60.
Yeah.
And then Moonlight, number 60, which, of course, it wasn't on there. It hadn't been made yet.
That just goes to show what a problem that is, right? I mean,
Now, this is a very interesting one. This is highest gains, meaning what it was in 2012 versus what it is now. Beau Travail, a movie we both like a lot, went from like 78 to 71 spots.
Yeah, and
Obviously, Claire Denis among the most
in that
renowned
movie,
female directors around the world.
when that movie came out on Criterion recently, that's another reason for that too. I seriously do think that's a big reason for a lot of these things, like we're saying, is more than anything. I think it's just, and another aspect of this too is the explosion of streaming in the past 10 years.
Yes.
I think that might have a lot
Criterion
to do with
Channel
this too.
itself,
right?
yeah.
And so,
And again, we are
Yeah.
talking about a very insular group of voters here.
Yeah.
Because the average person ain't watching a Criterion Channel. If you're on Film Twitter or somebody who's in this critical space, or that you're going to have these viewing options.
And I mean, let me just say, as a for Beau Travail, I show the ending to that movie every so often. My kids love it. Middle schoolers now, if they sat through that whole movie, they'd hate it. But the ending of it, they were quite fans of. But yeah,
Ali, Fear Eats the Soul, went
That's
up
pretty
43 spots. Night of the Hunter, this is random that it in 2022 is going up a list like this.
I've never
You know what I
been
mean?
that crazy about that movie.
I
so
like it,
it's
but
fine.
but I'm more shocked the fact that it.
Yeah.
Again, we're moving forward in time, and it's like going up further.
Once again, people have tweeted that video of Charles Lawton directing the kids a bunch in the last so many. I'm serious. I feel like there's something to do with a lot of this. Is this type of stuff like
Gene Dillman went up 34 spots. Of
Yeah.
course, that's obviously a huge bump.
Yeah.
But we talked about Tuki Buki
also
went up
saw
27
a
spots.
Soul Criterion release recently.
Close Up went up 25. That's a pretty great movie. I wouldn't necessarily rank it as high as they did, but of
I'm
course.
surprised Casablanca wasn't higher.
The new movie Casablanca from
Yeah.
1942 jumped 21 spots.
Yeah.
Mulholland Drive again went up 20 spots.
I'm surprised
M-
it had been as higher as it was, Mulholland Drive, in 2012.
Yeah.
Because that's really not that much considering.
I wonder
how
if
new that
anybody
is.
tried to put on Twin Peaks: The Return on their list, and if like they were just rejected that or just didn't. I don't know. because there's been a lot of talk
Yeah.
about that. M went up 20 spots.
Yeah, I mean, that new movie from 1932.
That's what I'm saying. Some
yeah.
of these movies have been out like 50, 60 plus years, and they're moving up. I think that's interesting. In the Mood for Love, that was kind of shocking that was as high as it was.
Yeah,
but then
and-
again, it wasn't, because you go on film Twitter any given day and you see, and again, I think that's a great movie. Don't get me wrong, but
It is
going up
but
as high as it
as
did.
far as Wong Kar-wai, who I'm a really pretty massive fan of, I must say. As far as I've only seen like a few of his movies, but I really love Chungking Express a lot. And I think that is slightly better than In the Mood for Love. But I've only seen In the Mood for Love once, so I really need to see that again. But yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. And Chungking Express was on the list, too. It was just further down. But
Playtime went up 19 spots. I love that. We've watched more Jacques Tati movies
I
recently.
haven't seen that yet, but yeah.
That's the consensus of his best film. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Imitation of Life went up 18 spots.
That also saw, I think, no, I'm thinking, well, it depends on which Imitation of Life. There's like 15 movies called Imitation of
Yeah.
Life, so I don't know which one they're talking about.
Now, these are movies that had the largest drop-offs, the top 100. So they were on the top 100, and then now they're not there. Godfather Part 2 was 31 in 2012, not on the list. Mm-hmm. And this was a controversy, I think, in 2012. Before that, they allowed Godfather 1 and 2 to be ranked together, but they stopped doing that in 2012. And so Godfather 1's still up there, but then Godfather 2 dropped because of that. So it was 31 in 2012.
And let me say, I'm actually glad to hear that, because where Godfather 1 stands more than Godfather 2.
Which we love Godfather 2,
They're both the
of
two
course.
best movies
Yeah.
ever made,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter. But I'm glad to see that it's not the opposite. That would really make me mad.
Gertrude was number 42. It went off the list. Raging Bull was number 53. That would be in my top 10.
Yeah.
I recently rewatched it. It's like catching up with an old friend every time I see him. Oh, what you been up to, Raging Bull? And the Raging Bull's always gonna why? You know, just like Touch of Evil.
That Dade County Stockade.
57.
That's its own touch. You can catch the touch of evil of the Dade County Stockade, is what I've heard.
Let me pronounce this right. La Maman et la Putain.
Yeah.
Did I say it right? 59.
I've never heard of that.
Wild Strawberries. I think there's only one Bergman movie on this list too, by the way, was pointed out. I think it's Persona.
And you know what the problem is with that is that wait a minute, really? Is that
well,
really the name
maybe
of that?
not. I don't,
Yeah, that movie-
Maybe there's Seven Seals on there
That
too.
movie in French is called The Mother and the Whore. It's a Jean Eustache film. I've heard of him, but yeah, but no, I think that was it. And it's like, yeah, Fanny and Alexander ain't on there.
Or Seventh Seal, yeah.
Yeah.
Either one of those.
Fanny and Alexander's is best, I think.
Pickpocket 63, not on there. Rio Bravo 63, not on there. Les Eclise was 73 last time. Les Enfants du Paradis 73.
La Futon Paradis,
Yeah.
Ugetsu, yeah.
Le Grand Illusion, not on there. Nashville, not on there.
Nashville not being on. Nashville and Raging Bull and
No
Godfather
Altman. Let's
2.
talk about who's not
Yeah.
on here at all. No Robert Altman. Of course, this list
No
is not
Dennis
in.
Hopper.
Well, he is in. You got to say he is in Blue Velvet at least.
Oh yeah,
That's
but I'm saying
right, I mean,
his
his
directorial
movie, yeah.
efforts is
No
what I'm
last
laughing
movie.
at. Yeah.
No Terrence
no
Malick.
colors.
I mean, out of all
Remember
the
colors?
yeah.
Yeah, none of that on here.
I mean,
No taps. No, all. Let's
So
make
like,
the list.
we could talk about the things that were just like, why is this not on there at all? You know,
People, you know what it is people have been watching that John Carpenter takedown of Robert Altman. Is what it is.
yeah. That
I kid you not. I guarantee that might be part of it.
but there's no Terrence Malick at all. Why?
Yeah.
Could it be that everybody has their like favorite Terrence Malick movie, and that actually watered down the mentions of a single?
Well, I'm
one
surprised
of them?
Badlands isn't on there at least, because Badlands is one of the most overly inflated, overrated movies ever made.
Shots fired.
Well, I mean, it's
I do
good,
like
but
it, but
please, I mean, like,
but he literally.
it's a great first feature.
Well, obviously,
Move on, you know?
Days of Heaven is already even better.
I sounded
than that.
almost like Tarantino talking about Drive. Nice try, like, but it's a great first feature. Days of Heaven is like way better than that is, like, in my
And
opinion.
Red Line.
Well,
Not on
and
here.
and we're not even getting to the point. And I'm surprised even the Tree of Life wasn't on there. I mean, there's all this stuff that it's
or
like,
New World even. There's
Yeah.
a run of those. I could
Right.
see any one of those being on here.
And that's what I'm surprised is that either Badlands or Tree of Life aren't on there because, let's pick the wrong let's pick the wrong Malick movies to love, right?
Well, I think I do think
but-
part of it might be that the votes were
It could
the
be.
mentions were scattered
It could
amongst
be.
those movies and
Because
so not
The
one
Thin
of
Red
them
Line
got it.
is clearly the best movie that, in my mind, that's been made in the past 30 years. That, and then, of course, our old friend, Paul Thomas Anderson. No mention. No, There Will Be Blood.
Master's my favorite movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I'm thinking
Or
about
Magnolia,
movies,
or
movies
whatever,
made in the
yeah.
last 10 years.
Yeah.
If we're thinking about what is worthy of that. Now, again, I'm
No
biased.
Mattress Man commercial. I mean, if we're going with short films, like, hello.
So,
Like,
and
hello.
we were in our group chat talking with, of course, our good buddy and cousin Philip about this because he had a lot of takes too. But I think the biggest takeaway from me of like things that are not here is no Terrence Malick is objectively bad. That is a bad thing that they have put out. If there is not one Terrence Malick movie represented,
I feel
on
like
this
there
list.
was less Godard than there used to be.
I think he had like 4 mentions. I think.
Still, yeah.
But I'm saying out of 100 movies ever made, 4 mentions is, that's among the higher.
It is,
numbers,
but
yeah.
like it's Godard, so I'm
Yeah.
surprised there's less.
I guess Coppola would have had like 2. Again, Wilder had 3 or 4.
Let's say, I think there was no Buñuel.
Yeah.
That's kind of surprising. There were some big
but
names.
no
that
Robert
were left
Altman
off,
and
yeah.
no Terrence Malick are
And you know what's
objectively
funny?
bad
When
to
you
me.
look at the AFI list, Altman is like one of the highest names on there, I think, pretty often. I don't remember the exact number, but that just goes to show that he is like the American filmmaker. That's the way a lot of
One
people
of the
think of him. And
tweets
then he isn't even listed in any of that.
This
It's just
was
surprising.
from Twitter user. This is their real Twitter handle: Stinky and Rotten.
Okay.
No spaces.
Hello, like
I retweeted this earlier this week. Nashville, one of the greatest and most radical contortions of popular commercial filmmaking we'll ever see from the American cinema, is out. A third-tier Blumhouse effort is in. Thanks, Sight and Sound, for illustrating how cinephiles are unbelievably easy marks, just like everyone else. Also, we haven't said no Steven Spielberg, period.
yeah. I mean, that's not a surprise.
It's
I mean,
not surprising, but it's not
Yeah.
good either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, and
Some people have said no Tarantino. It's like, yeah.
I mean,
think
of
we're
all
good.
the other notes I have,
Right.
that would be
I'm fine with
on the
that.
second page.
I mean,
Maybe,
I love
and say-
Tarantino.
yeah.
But it's like, no, yeah, we're good.
So where do we go from here? Wait 10 years and see what happens.
I just don't care. I mean, I'm immediately going to move on. I mean, to me, like I said, we had a lot of thoughts about it, but like, to me, it ultimately comes down to, I just think it's as simple as the explosion of social media, Criterion releases, because I do think that Schrader's right, but about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as we've been sitting here talking about it, I've been seeing other aspects that I'm kind of connecting the dots on. I'm like, no, I think it's just more of availability rather than people are explicitly changing, oh no, we need to do this because it's woke or cool or what. And I think that's a portion of it. I don't think that's totally not what it is. And I think that's part of it is that people want to see these things represented, and so therefore they put them on there to look cool. No, for the most part, I think it is a genuine, and I also think that with cinephilia in the last so many years, we've seen a draw away from big stylism towards these more minimalistic efforts. And I think that's why something like Jen Dillman would make it on there too high up, is because they're all becoming obsessed with this thing that barely does anything and is great, rather than something that does everything and is great, like Citizen Kane, right?
I think there's somebody else also mentioned Lawrence of Arabia is not on the list. That for many years, of course, is
good.
You know, but just
Yeah.
that is a movie
Right.
that is widely held as
Yeah.
one of the great films of all time. You know,
Right.
we're not the biggest fans.
So I
of
think
it.
there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's fine. I mean, it's all right. But but that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just ultimately what it is. It's just this. There's all these little things about, like I said, availability of movies and just kind of change of taste and just a bigger viewing audience. And I totally support that in every way. Like, ask more people or a Democratic society here. Because I would get tired of looking at the same old, like, oh, yeah, we got all these same movies on there.
You mentioned it earlier. Let's just briefly go through what the top 10 of the directors
This
called
always
is.
makes more sense to me. because it's like, oh, okay.
All right,
like,
so tied for 9th are Close Up, In the Mood for Love, and Persona.
Persona.
Mirror number
That's
8.
randomly high, but that is that is probably my favorite Tarkovsky movie, and that is a really great movie, but that is surprising to me that's that high. But,
Tied for 6th is 8.5 and Vertigo.
yeah.
Tied for 4th is Jane Dillman and Tokyo Story. And number 3, The Godfather. Number 2, Citizen Kane. And number 1, 2001: A Space Odyssey. So don't worry, white guys like ourselves.
Yeah.
We are represented in the top 3 of the director's poll, which in of itself is a reflection of, frankly, a more likely conservative body of filmmakers. Just
It also happens to be 3 of the best movies ever made. That's kind of funny. It's kind of funny that's on
if
there.
you had a gun in my head and
Yeah.
you were going to make me make a top 10, guess what? All 3 of those would be on there.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
I mean, all 3 of those movies would be represented. Again, this goes for both lists. I don't know about the director's ones as closely, but another thing too. I got two thoughts going on at once
ahead.
here.
Yeah.
Um,
I was gonna mention this. So I'm glad you were gonna bring it up. Yeah, you go ahead.
real quick, no
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, cool.
I'm why? That is clearly one of the best.
Wizard
films
of
ever.
Oz is so
that to
fast.
me is the second greatest film.
I was
of all
having
time.
I was having a conversation with somebody about this last week at some point, talking about how Wizard of Oz was at the time was lost a lot of money. Nobody really cared about it. It wasn't big. It was big with children. It was whatever. Yeah. And then on TV it became a big thing, right? And just that movie's total 180 of appreciation has just been so big that it's just automatically, and other than the fact that it is one of the best movies ever made, that's literally how people learn about storytelling in general, is that movie. It just doesn't, it's ridiculous.
Okay, so
but anyway.
The only mention of another big person we're a fan of. This is I think this is me and you saying this the first time I've seen this be said. Now maybe it's been said elsewhere. John Cassavetes only has one movie on the director's poll, Woman Under the Influence. Not all that surprising. That's the number, the highest ranked of his. Number 19. No mention in the critics poll. That's absurd too. That's up there to me with Malick and Altman not being on there. It's no John Cassavetes. Especially you would think, due to what a lot of things we've been talking about, that maybe One Under the Influence would get a mention, even, you know what I mean, in the critics poll, but
and
no
people's
mention.
love of Peter Falk.
Right.
So people's love of Peter Falk made it not possible for that or Wings of Desire to be on there. Either one of those.
Well,
and then Vendors
we
is
could
not
go
on
on
either.
our boy who's
Is he on the phone? Wait a second.
Wait,
I'm getting
Vim,
a call.
wait a minute. Vim, hello. Can you hear us?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Do you have any reactions to the Sight and Sound poll in general?
Well, no, not particularly.
All right. Well, it's good to talk to you, Vim.
One thing. To say is.
Yeah, make it quick, Vim.
Oh wait, no.
He hung up.
Wait a second. He's sending me a text.
Oh wait, he's texting. What did he say, Levi?
He says, well, part of it's in gutter German. I can't really understand this part of it. But no, because it literally says this is translated from gutter German. He typed that. I don't know what I don't know why he typed that. But he said that awards do not matter. I will continue to hang on.
Spew venom about the film. Is that what he said? No.
No, hang on. Let me get Google Translate for a second. Hang on. It looks like. Hang on. It looks like saying something about I will continue to. What is it? What's that whole foundation he has? That whole thing.
The Vim Vendors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Vim Vendors Foundation. Yeah. Oh, yeah, baby. Yeah. It says something about I will continue to archive and restore my own work. Screw everything else. Goodbye.
Wow.
So
I'm glad Vim. I
don't know if that's a cry for help or just him just saying.
I'm glad Vim got to get a brief moment here return. But again, we're fans of him. He's not on here. And again, I'm not about.
Well, he was on here, but he wasn't on the list.
Right. I'm not about to start banging. We all have our pet filmmakers. We're like, once I'm going further down the list, like, what about Jim Jarmusch, or what about this, or what about the Farrelly brothers? Like where is something about Mary on
Where's
this list?
movie 43?
I don't want to put you on the
Osmosis
spot.
Jones,
This is something to think about. Like, what would be the most shocking movie that you would genuinely think is one of the greatest films of all time that you would maybe put on a list like this that people go, Again, I don't want to totally put you on the spot because I don't even know what mine would be necessarily either. But it's just something to think about. Maybe we'll return to this later.
I'd have to look at a list. Give me just a second, and I'll kind of look. It probably won't take long.
Because again, I don't genuinely know. I would throw something like, honestly, it's something about Mary or Dumb and Dumber in terms of these are great comedies, I think, and where that would fit. You know.
I'm looking here at a list of kind of stuff. Let's see. I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean would be. I'm not even kidding. It's literally one of the best movies ever made. Almost I mean, because I'm just looking at movies I've given 5 stars. Let's see. I'm looking at other stuff. Fantasia is something that never gets listed anywhere, and I think that's one.
Another thing just to think about.
Irma Vep is one. I mean, a lot of people would say that. But
yeah, I don't know genuinely what mine would be for that, so I didn't want to put it on the spot.
Right.
But I'm just curious, that random movie that'd be on a list, you'd be like, really, that? I don't know. I don't think this is all that shocking. I'd say something like Barton Fink.
Yeah.
And again, we're going further down here. The Coen brothers, they don't have any on here, which is fine. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying should be noted,
Yeah. My answer is Pirates of the Caribbean.
But I
original
think,
Pirates of the Caribbean.
that's a good option, I think. I would agree with that.
Because it's a great action movie and great blockbuster. It's like one of the best we've ever had. So it's just I don't know.
And again, and I think another thing is just specifically with PTA, who we would agree is, I think, the greatest contemporary filmmaker of the last 20, 30 years in terms of his new work and what that's meant and everything. That, again, there's a certain waiting game, again, what we were going to earlier about, when are movies from the more 2000s movies going to start making this? Just because, over time...
And we just went ahead and jumped ahead to the 2010s.
Yeah, but we went ahead and jumped to the 2010s, which was undeniably not as good.
I guess one of the only big movies that I can think of that came out in 2000s that was Mulholland Drive. I can't think of another one off the top of my head on the list. But yeah, we skipped over.
In the Mood for Love. When was that?
That was 2001. Yeah.
So we're thinking about American movies though. Anyway.
Yes. Oh yeah, there'd be a bunch of But I'm just thinking of stuff that
But again, that's what's kind of weird is that we went ahead and jumped over functionally a whole decade.
I feel like we as a whole culture just jump over the 2000s, and that's going to continue to be an issue as we move forward. I think because of 9/11 and the war on terror, everybody just wants to forget any of those things happened, and I guess we just culturally move on, which is very saddening to me because I grew up in the 2000s, and so it's kind of just it's kind of my time. But
yeah,
I don't know, whatever.
Any other final thoughts on any of this?
Not really. Like I said, I think part of it is all those factors that we discussed about availability, social media, all those things. Not as much of what Schrader's saying, although I think that is a part of it. But I honestly think that people are more just interested in other things than they used to be, just by nature.
And
it is a very different world than it was 10 years ago.
Well, also, just again, the virtue of this is what happens when more people get to voting.
Right.
And I'm all for a more larger democratic process in general, so... and again, I think what any pearl clutching people would have is just remember it will not be this way forever. And again, wait 10 years. I know it sounds like a long ways away, but this will change and this will evolve. And who knows? A movie released in 2032 might even make the list. Who knows?
Who even cares what it is?
Yeah.
What's on the list? The whole thing's funny. It's just
the world's going to have bigger problems in 2032.
Than what's on the Sight and Sound. We have bigger problems right now than what's on the Sight and Sound list.
So, but I'm just already jumping ahead.
That's what I thought was so funny about it is everybody you had kept mentioning, and I'm not saying this to poke fun at you or anything, but I'm just saying you kept mentioning, Sight and Sound list is coming out this week, and I just kept being like,
okay,
okay, cool.
I was mostly saying that because I knew that was going to be a big major talking point coming.
Yeah, no, I get it. Camogie, yeah,
Camogie. All right, now let's get into some real quality cinema.
Some moral cinema.
Here's the trailer for Christmas with the Kranks.
In this friendly little town, there lived an enchanting family named the Kranks. Every year, they would celebrate Christmas together.
Merry Christmas!
Until the year their daughter Blair left for the holidays.
This won't be the same.
Then Luther got a brilliant idea.
We skip Christmas. We'll go bask in the Caribbean sun.
We skip Christmas. What's up? No Christmas Eve party?
Run away from Christmas, huh?
A lot of the neighbors are pretty upset.
Five months, 2 weeks, 2 days. My love baby's been gone. If you see my baby,
Free Frosty, free Frosty.
They want Frosty?
They do not get Frosty.
Nora, stop the car. Talk to me, Nora, please.
hurry. If you see my baby, please send her home.
Hello? Mom? Dad? I changed my mind and I'm coming home for Christmas.
What?
Based on the best-selling novel Skipping Christmas.
We have only 12 hours, so we're going to perform a little Christmas miracle. I'm getting the ham. You get the tree.
Tim Allen,
Your face. It's like it's frozen.
I got a Botox injection today.
Luther?
and Jamie Lee Curtis. Christmas with the Kranks.
What are you doing, Luther? Whoa! Easy!
And here we are. We're back.
Love the ending of that trailer with his. You didn't see it, but his face. Like, it was a real what we always talk about, the some stupid animated movie where somebody they hit glass and then
they slide down there,
and that always gets this laugh.
And I think Up is functionally a perfect movie, but there is that moment on the blimp in the climax where it has that sliding on the glass moment, and even a great movie like that has to fall short. Luckily for us, Christmas with the Kranks is not a great movie.
No.
Indeed, it's a bad movie, and we'll get into this later. But after the follow-up we had with it, almost oh, wow, that wasn't so bad, was
what
it?
A throwback.
But in all honesty, this movie is quite bad.
Yeah.
And the horrific nature of the next movie shouldn't distract from that. So,
right. Yeah.
Christmas with the Kranks came out in 2004. I don't know when exactly this movie came out month-wise.
It was
probably November.
November 24th.
So, we were hot off the heels of the Bush-Cheney re-election. The Iraq War was raging. Not great times. So
the Raging Cajun was not
happy.
Yes.
So he was so unhappy he would later be in Wedding Crashers along with,
John
of
McCain.
course, also Assassination of Jesse James. In 2007, McCain should have had his follow-up answer. Since Carville's going to be in one of these movies, serious movies, I should be in one in preparation
310 to
for
Yuma, maybe.
Yeah,
when did that come out?
It was 2007, I think.
Yeah. So why not 310 to Yuma remake?
Yeah. And he's getting ready to run for president, so who knows?
Right.
That could have made the difference.
Oh,
Anyways,
well.
Christmas with the Kranks.
Yep, it's a Christmas comedy, an American Christmas comedy film. Yeah. Based on a 2001 novel, Skipping Christmas by John Grisham.
What's one of the most random aspects of this whole movie is that it's a Grisham adaptation.
Yeah. It was directed by Joe Roth, our old friend. Written and produced by Chris Columbus, so he's showing back up as always. You know what I just realized is that we have not done Home Alone on here yet, which I feel like.
We have a handful of movies that are, I won't name the other ones, but are break in case of emergency. We're definitely going to do these one day, but
that will probably honestly be a bring back to the commentary. If we're going to do that,
because we have a lot of Home Alone thoughts and takes based on tons of things.
But Joe Roth also directed. Let's just go ahead and go through this now so we can get it the hell over with. Young Guns.
Well, he
was a producer.
That,
yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, we've got him as producer, director. He's only made a few movies. Streets of Gold. Is that a Streets of Fire sequel or something? It literally has the same font of Streets of Fire.
Yeah.
Kid you not. I'm going to look into that. Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise. Coupe de Ville, America's Sweethearts, and Freedom Land, which is an adaptation of the Richard Price novel.
Okay. That's random.
But anyway,
so adapting Grisham and Price.
Yeah. And not the best of either, I'm sure.
While, we're probably not going to talk much more about John Grisham here. Obviously, John Grisham's mostly known for his legal thrillers, and in the 90s, that really dominated a lot of, huge legal thrillers in the 90s were written by Grisham. So it's kind of funny I guess he was like, I'll do a Christmas book, skip it. And again, I want to reiterate this. I think the kernel of this idea is a interesting one. It could be done better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even go as far as to give that to the next movie. I don't know what the idea really there is. But I mean, there is a kernel of a good idea here of like this whole family is going to maybe skip Christmas this year, and oh my God, what happens when you skip Christmas? And again, there are a lot of problems with a lot of things that come out of that. But I mean, I think the idea itself is a germ of something good. But,
yeah. By the way, just so we're clear, Streets of Gold is not a Streets of Fire remake, no matter how close the font looks like Streets of Fire.
You can tell they were trying to traffic in that.
It's about Russia and the Soviet Union and boxers somehow, one of which is Wesley Snipes. So I'm not really sure about what's going on there. Anyway, Christmas with the Kranks is about, it says the film tells we'll go through the cast momentarily, don't you worry, of a couple who decide to skip Christmas one year with their when their daughter is away, since their daughter's away, much to the chagrin of their neighbors until their daughter decides to come home at the last minute. Yeah, we talked about, I think it's a good idea for a movie, actually, is the idea of, and honestly, I think we said this early on, they should have just went full-on raunch fest comedy on it, like straight-up satire, straight-up awful, vulgar, disgusting depravity, right? Like the kind of movie where like you got puss-ridden moles hanging all over the place.
You're saying like the Farley should have maybe made this?
Well, maybe not that much, but like, because I feel like there's, and we can talk later about this, but the whole undercurrent of this movie is clearly this whole like the fascism of society and conformity, and just like kind of, I'm fascinated by that actually, genuinely, in this, about how Christmas is supposed to be this positive holiday, whether it's a spiritual one or not for the people who are celebrating it. But yeah, and we see with this is like a kabuki version of it, but like how insane people are about their Christmas traditions and about just the lengths of hatred that people go to celebrate a positive holiday, I think is something that honestly we need to continue to think about and interrogate, and yet this movie does it, adequately enough for what it is, but it could have been way better.
I agree with that, and I think, I feel like now, in the last 10 years, there's more of a market for raunchy Christmas movies than there might have been this exact point. I don't know exactly when Bad Santa came out. It was probably around this time, or maybe a little later, I don't know.
I think it was a little earlier.
It might have been. Let's see. Bad Santa.
Wi-Fi is not working worth crap here, by the way.
So. But, I feel like that is a version of a raunchy Christmas movie. All right, so just before
2003.
This. Okay, so just before this. But I feel like now, like, it would be more of a
you're an
market.
Emotional effing cripple. Your soul is, anyway.
But I feel like, now there would be more of a market to make this raunchier. But putting Tim Allen in it, who's known magically as this, like, will say anything comedian. You know what I mean? He's got this like reputation as a more conservative-minded comedian or comic actor, yet only does the lamest brain, safest things ever. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the things he's in. And we had this written down too. He and Chris Columbus are obviously huge kind of Christmas movie icons in their own way, because Tim Allen, of course, had. I'm guessing, were the Santa Claus movies still being made by the time this was coming out? I think they were.
Oh, yeah.
Like that third one, when did it come out?
That third one didn't come out till like the late 2000s.
Okay, 06 or 07, maybe something like that.
But the greatest title of all time, Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause, which is just hilarious.
06.
06. I remember we went and saw that.
But
we want to talk briefly before we move on. Excuse me. No. I feel like we have to discuss this.
Yeah.
Of Martin Short's Jack Frost in that movie, because I feel like we're never going to get a chance to bring this back up.
I think they've both been also in Jungle to Jungle. They'd worked together back in the 90s.
Yes. Yeah, it says, remember that. Allen and Short had previously worked together in the 1997 Disney comedy film Jungle to Jungle, which I've never heard of.
I remember seeing that
until you just mentioned
way back when.
I'm looking at the poster.
This is one of the first times I ever remember Martin Short seeing him in anything.
I'm trying to load it. Let me roll it, or let me load it.
No, we're both huge fans of Martin Short.
Yes, but there's a particular moment in that movie that is one of the most embarrassing. Like we just rewatched Avatar the other day. One of the worst line readings ever. Now, it's also one of the worst written
in preparation,
lines
of course, for Avatar 2, which is finally coming out,
is,
which we'll undoubtedly be talking about on the pod.
Look at how, by the way, hang on. I know we're jumping all over the place. Jungle 2 Jungle poster. Okay, so we've got, oh my gosh. All right, so we've got Wall Street. He's like
tied to the Wall Street
by
sign.
like a boa constrictor, and like Martin Short as like an
indigenous
native jungle person.
Yeah.
So it's like Crocodile Dundee, but like
how politically correct do you think this movie would be if we went back and watched it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, it's Jungle 2 Jungle.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be a sequel, or is it just like
was Jonathan Taylor Thomas in that movie, or
let me look. Sam Huntington. No,
there's some other. Well, I'm thinking of just the '90s. Maybe them both being on Home Improvement. I'm thinking of maybe.
I don't want to die, Dad.
But they were both in these Disney movies in the '90s.
Now, but anyway, okay. So one of the worst line readings ever from one of the worst written lines ever is in Avatar, the James Cameron film, where Sam Worthington says, "Sometimes your entire life boils down to one insane move," which we have been talking about for the last 2 days.
And there's little things people make fun of Avatar here and there. I've never really heard anybody draw attention to that line.
One insane move, like it's a chess move or something. I don't know.
And we were talking too about when we were watching that, like how mind blowing is it that you can be in the highest grossing movie of all time and then still not have some pretty big career bump because of that, and then. Oh, you're going to be
I did Black Ops.
Or he was in that Terminator
that's right.
movie, which he probably got through James Cameron connections. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
anyway, so there is this line reading in Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause, of where a girl's like, "You need to chill," to Jack Frost, and he says,
Okay, chill.
I invented chill.
Hopefully we found that clip. I'm
sure we did,
sure.
yeah.
But just in case we didn't, why don't you give us that?
I invented chill.
Because he's Jack Frost, get it?
That was in all the trailers. It's got to be out there.
It probably is. I'm just hedging our bets.
Well, I got to scream it anyway.
Yeah.
Literally one of the worst things ever.
We love Martin Short. Again,
but he'll take money, whatever. You know.
Well, also, and we haven't watched the whole Santa Claus movies in some time. But
I don't want to either.
The second one has the whole thing of like what is he, like a robot or like a clone or something of Tim Allen. He's like the villain, basically.
That's like the weirdest thing ever because it's like him, but it's like a mannequin doll.
It's like a robot, basically.
So
whatever
weird.
It is. Yeah.
It's like in the flesh, standing right in front of you, with no one else around, as the fake Mr. Krabs would say.
And again, to just
anyway.
talk about Tim Allen a little bit here. I feel like it's easy to hate on Tim Allen, but for the particular lane he mostly stays in, I think he's a mostly fine enough.
Yeah, I don't actually.
Comic actor,
I know a lot of people really hate Tim Allen. I don't really mind him so much as I just don't. And I mean, something that's unspoken that we haven't even mentioned is him as Buzz Lightyear. I mean,
one of the truly great voice vocal performances.
So like, I mean, for that, if nothing else, I will always accept Tim Allen
like
for what he is.
He's even like steered into the lane of being like, what was that stupid Last Man Standing show he was on, which is almost Home Improvement 2.0. It looks like, which we've not really watched much Home Improvement either. It should be said.
Honestly, watched more Last Man Standing than I did.
But like, watching Last Man Standing, like it has this whole veneer of like, he's more conservative and he's not going to take this fuddy-buddy modernism or whatever. But on the whole, it's rather inoffensive. Pot shots. It's like that's to the point of being kind of lame that he even thinks this is all that like controversial in any way. You know what I mean? And again, he's had his controversies in the past, not only due to his cocaine use, but also just again trying to like incite more. I'm a more conservative, and I'm not going to stand for this politically correct crap of today. But then you watch the things he's in, and it's fairly light, inoffensive stuff. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't really have that much of a problem with him. And on the whole, he's mostly pretty funny in this movie, too, it should be said.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's actually...
The whole scene, we played it last week of, like, him when he's got the Botox and he's, like, keeps trying to eat.
Feel
and he
anything.
That is actually a genuinely funny scene.
We continue to laugh. I mean, we watched the trailer and we were still laughing about it. I mean, And I think Jamie Lee Curtis is fine enough, too, but we'll get
they're an odd coupling, I'll say that. In terms of,
it's pretty different. I mean, it's pretty strange. I mean, because now it's funny with Jamie Lee Curtis now, especially the last few years, we've seen her be in these new Halloween movies. We saw her in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She's done Knives Out. She's done this more explicitly genre lane that she's went. Whereas this was at a time in her career where she was kind of just doing anything, it seems like. And so that's kind of interesting. Quickly, before we move on, do we want to go ahead and just talk about something that went viral here a while back, that documentary about the Dana Carvey show?
Before we do that, I just also just wanted to mention about Chris Columbus. Of course, his first big script he ever wrote that got attention was Gremlins. That's, of course, a Christmas movie. Home Alone, of course, which he directed the first two movies. And then even like the Christmas sections of even the first two Harry Potter movies are very iconic. So just, these are both, obviously Chris Columbus did not direct this movie, but it has his certain fingerprints on it. You can certainly discern as far as like the Home Alone stuff, the connections you can find. So again, there is an implicit appeal of this movie, and again, they don't even need to say exactly who Chris Columbus is. Which again, this would have been his first thing in any capacity, really, since I think Chamber of Secrets would have been by this point. But just like that, all they need to say is like from the director. They can even say that and get away with that, from the director of Home Alone, even by writing Home Alone, and obviously Tim Allen being in it. That instantly it's like, oh, these Christmas movies that I like, these talents. Oh, I'll go for that.
Right.
Now, what you were just mentioning was there's a documentary that's been recently made about the
Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey show.
The Dana Carvey show, and like it's obviously short-lived nature and all the huge talents who actually worked on that show, including Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, who else? There's a lot of people. Robert Smigel, and just a bunch of people. And there was a clip they showed of them talking about the fact that I think they followed Home Improvement, and that they really had no clue what Home Improvement was or was trying to be, and then they were following that. And they're both comedies, obviously, but they're both very different comedies. I will say one thing I really like about that clip of them talking about is they're not really all that condescending towards Home Improvement. They're kind of actually thinking out loud about, this was a show that was supposed to be a family show and everybody watched, and we're definitely this more avant-garde kind of style of comedy. But there's a clip that they show of, it's like a very special episode of like Jonathan Taylor Thomas crying like, I don't want to die, Dad. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Whatever it is, we'll get through it.
And he's hugging him, and it's like the announcing voice, like a special episode of Home Improvement, followed by the Diet Root Beer.
The Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey show. Do we just want to play the clip here because it's on YouTube, so we can find it.
I had never watched Home Improvement. When I heard about the time slot, I thought, oh, well, maybe it'll be compatible because Tim Allen's kind of a man's man kind of guy, and seemed like maybe he's a hip comedian. He'd been busted for cocaine or something. I don't know, is Home Improvement a little racy maybe, right?
I get your point now, Tim. You respect me, huh?
I hadn't watched it until about 4 shows in. I just stopped everything at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday and watched it, and just watched in horror, just not believing what we had foisted on this audience.
ABC Tuesday, a parent's worst fear, losing a child.
I don't want to die, Dad.
You never know whose family it will happen to. An episode so powerful, it hits home.
We'll beat this thing, no matter what it is, I'm not letting anything happen to you.
A special Home Improvement followed by the Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey show.
What can you say? I mean, that just says it all. That just says it all. What were we doing?
It was being marketed as this kind of fun show. And I think people were like, what the fuck is this?
And I thought about what we had put on television following this family-oriented show that I now realized was successful because kids and parents could watch it together, and then our show would start and kids and parents would, run for their lives.
That whole show was just like, fuck you, Dad.
I'm not Home Improvement, all right? Fuck you, I like Grandma the Clown, all right? You might not get it, but that's because that's your deal, all right? That's you, that's on you.
And my dad, of course, is like, I don't like Home Improvement either. Why are you yelling at me?
And I love initially when they're showing the clip of Stephen Colbert, like, already clutching his hand, like, oh my God, is that what was going on Home Improvement?
And Steve Carell kind of like, yeah. And then that just immediately, all the laughter that comes out of that. I love just the way the guy reads it. It's like, Home Improvement, followed by the Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey Show. Like, it's just that serious. That reminds me of, I'm going to play this at the very end of this episode. There was like a late 80s Muppet Christmas special kind of thing. It wasn't obviously Muppet Christmas Carols before that, but of like, oh, it's like, you're going to hear the audio later. I might actually just take a brief pause here so Levi can hear it.
Merry Christmas, everyone! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, all!
I'm Dr. Timothy Johnson. Later on Nightline, it's a controversy about life and death. Do you keep a doomed baby alive so its organs can be used to save the lives of others?
Stay tuned for Julie Andrews and The Sound of Christmas next, followed by Truman Capote's Emmy-winning classic, A Christmas Memory, starring Geraldine Page.
So we just went ahead and decided to play that in there.
You've already, everybody's going to walk away from that thinking about the same thing, but my favorite part is Truman Capote's after that.
But don't you love just the music in the background?
Yeah, it was like, a doomed baby, to keep a doomed baby alive.
I was going around on Twitter like a year or so.
Wish it would have been that CNN woman who's like, a doomed baby alive.
Oh, gosh,
got literally the worst voice ever. Anyway, yeah.
Where are we again?
Anyway, Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey Show. But yeah, that I just thought was so funny because it was like, made me start thinking about Tim Allen again, and so I've kind of been thinking about Tim Allen off and on.
And again, I'm not trying to be some big Tim Allen defender necessarily, but I'm like, of all the figures in the contemporary cultures of celebrity, he's fine. Let him be around. He's,
so we've talked enough about him as Luther Crank. He's kind of the.
He's what does he do again? He's like, we're just working in an office. It's kind of non.
Let me see if it actually even says. I don't know. He's like an accountant.
So just some boring office job. And him just being constantly harassed by all the people he works with. Oh, wait a minute, you're skipping Christmas. And again, he's not even this like huge anti-Christmas guy. He's just like, oh, our daughter's leaving now. We only had the one daughter. And he comes to the natural conclusion I think a lot of people of a certain age get to when they get a little older, where they're like, let's not do Christmas as big. He comes up with the idea, well, let's travel at Christmas. And that's a very popular thing, actually, that, certainly not the majority of families do, but a sizable minority of families decide to do during Christmas,
Right.
But
yeah, so
I think he makes a good little lead in terms of being this kind of slightly sarcastic, just average, everyday American.
Yeah, because his whole plan is, first of all, to save money on Christmas and also to get out. The whole point is they're wanting to get out of the house because their daughter's not there.
Yeah.
Because she went into the Peace Corps in like Peru.
Oh my God, isn't his daughter just the best? Oh my God, she's so great. Oh my God, she's so great. Like, I think the Peace Corps is a very admirable thing to do. But we were just constantly being told how awesome and great his daughter is.
Yeah.
And after a certain point, I'm like, I don't even care at all. And the fact that also the trailer spoiled this, so it's not much of a spoiler anyways, that like, she's coming home, actually, and everybody will move heaven and earth to make sure she gets her Christmas. It's just like, okay.
And like, she's supposed to be this humble person, but it's like, then she expects all these little things, like, oh, where's this food I want? Where's this? Where's that? And it's just totally ridiculous. I mean, because it's like, we're not doing this for Luther. We're doing this for Blair. Yeah. Meanwhile, her name is friggin' Blair.
Blair Crank. Sounds like an action.
Blair Crank.
Crank 2.
Played by Julie Gonzalo.
Crank 3.
Who was on that Veronica Mars.
Okay. Good for her.
Dallas. The Dallas reboot. You remember that?
Yeah.
And Supergirl. We don't have anything much to say about her. Other than
she's not in the movie very much.
But it's just very much like, oh my God, I'm so great.
But it's just like the whole, and like you said, they're like, we're not doing it for you. It's like, because we've been feuding the whole movie. Like, we're going to do it for her. And it's just like, I don't know.
And like literally, there's the moment where she's coming home and they get Eric Purse Sullivan, the kid Spike, who is on Malcolm in the Middle, to literally guide her in on a bike.
And then there's like, it's like a police escort and all this stuff. It's like, what? It's like, the whole time I'm like, what is so special about her? Like, anyways.
Anyway, Jamie Lee Curtis is Nora Crank, Luther's wife. She, of course, is more like accepts it, but isn't really into the whole thing anyway. The whole idea is she's the one who has to take a lot of the brunt of the anger, because she has to be nice and represent the family in different places, and
it's always slightly strange to see Jamie Lee Curtis in these type of roles. And I think of like
strange to see Sigourney Weaver die in Avatar, then possibly come back
as the daughter of Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana's characters. Whatever, we'll see. We're not even going to get into
literally. If I shake my head any harder, it will fly off of my shoulders.
Apparently, what Stephen Lang's role in the movie
the
is
recombinant,
which will again we're going to talk about that movie at length when it comes out. But
they will eat you up, like kind of.
But like it's a weird fit for her.
Black cow, bye bye blackbird. Like
when
love Stephen Lang.
She plays these roles of like the hapless housewife, like in this or in True Lies, because we all got to know her, of course, through Halloween. And roles that in general that were more explicitly or implicitly feminist or more women kind of fending for themselves, and then all of a sudden there's a period where she's in a lot of these kind of more lamestream movies and is just like hapless mother, and then I feel like in recent years has been getting more towards playing better roles again or being more offered,
she's making moves about trauma.
But you know what I mean?
The job is not to score. The job's to get the girl. Like,
but I mean, a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, among many other things, is like she just gets a lot of random things to do in a role that in the beginning seems as very small.
Then
and
she has hot dog fingers, and it's like,
yeah. But I mean, it's just strange to see her in these type of movies where she's a hapless mom, or hapless wife, in like True Lies, but. Anyways, she's good in the movie.
Yeah.
Now, somebody else you really love. Let's go and talk about this.
Well, Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd is Vic
we've talked about him before on here, I think.
Probably. But listen to the way this describes him. Vic Frohmeyer, the Kranks' domineering neighbor and usually the ward boss of the neighborhood.
Ward boss? Was he like? Was he like working in Tammany Hall?
Right. Well, and I feel like that's ultimately what he is, though. It's strange that they would describe it that way, though. I mean, but he's an incredibly like Bush 43 era fascist like.
And we don't want to we really don't want to we're more liberal, progressive minded people, of course. We don't want to read too much into the Bush era politics of this movie, but it is there. There is a certain.
You can make this same movie about what you don't support the Iraq War or you don't support the troops, and it would be the exact same movie.
Yeah,
make it around the 4th of July. There you go.
Yeah, you could honestly.
And make that a comedy.
Independence Day with the Kranks. That'd be the sequel that never got made.
But yeah, and so Dan Aykroyd is literally one of the worst people. The only person worse than him is our old friend Chevy Chase, who, as I recently recognized, was the Ryan Reynolds of his day, but he never even tried to look nice about himself.
Yeah, Ryan
Which
Reynolds
I
has
respect
a veneer,
more, though.
Yeah, well,
I respect more that he is
more of a product of its time than what Ryan Reynolds is
openly an a-hole. Now Ryan Reynolds is like, oh, I'm an a-hole, but I'll smile and I'll pat you on the back. What did you expect for us to just pat you on the back, as Pete Campbell would say?
But I feel like that's a product of the times, more than anything.
They're like, oh,
it's got to be nice,
right? But what's weird about Dan Aykroyd is that he was never even like that. He just sucks. He just sucks. And
to be fair, Dan Aykroyd will at least always have the original Blues Brothers,
right? That's
you
true.
know what I mean. So that's always.
But he's one of the most annoying things about that movie. We're on a mission from God,
from God.
that.
He should have said that in this movie. Brought it back. We're on a mission for God.
Yeah. But, he's a real... Oh, yeah, Canadian, yeah. I figured.
Ryan Reynolds. Well, Ryan Reynolds... Chevy Chase.
Well, where's Chevy Chase from?
He's an
Chevrolet Chase.
Chevrolet Chase. What is his real name, by the way?
His real name is Cornelius Crane Chase. He's from New York City. Yeah.
It almost like, you know, I don't like Chevy Chase, but it seems like it's almost too easy to hate on Chevy Chase now.
Yes, because it's like, but Dan Aykroyd is just sitting right out there in front of everybody, just existing, and it's like, yeah, Dan Aykroyd is, and also him being in Ghostbusters,
which we're not.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Like, he talks like a 5-year-old. Like, he talks like a 5-year-old Chicagoan.
Yeah,
like
Chicago. Yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
You know,
like,
at least we got John Candy out of the 70s,
Yes.
80s Canadian.
Well,
so
him and
Harold
I guess
Ramis,
Harold
Richard.
Ramis,
Is he Canadian? No.
Talking about Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis.
Yeah. Now Rick Moranis is a saint, and John Candy too. But no, I mean it's just out of that whole group. It seems like the person who stuck around the longest is Dan Aykroyd.
Did you hear, by the way, about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is getting like a new 4K release?
Why that movie needs to be in 4K, I'm not sure.
Which everything's in that way. Right, but that it has, like, there's been like some legendary for years, like 45-minute, like a deleted scene reel that's not really been released. And
I've kind of been hearing about it.
And that it's coming out, and that there's this clip that was on Twitter of like him like eating a hot dog. John Candy eating a hot dog and smoking at the same time. It's like really like a bit funny physical comedy.
Yeah, that movie's pretty good. I haven't seen it in a really long time though. But anyway, but I think that's what makes me mad about Dan Aykroyd though, is it's not like John Candy who died or Rick Moranis who just kind of left Hollywood and didn't really
for noble reasons,
it just didn't really want to do movies anymore, or Chevy Chase who like
kind of just sabotaged his
own career by being an open a-hole.
Yeah.
Like Dan Aykroyd has stuck around more than those other people to the point where he's just more annoying in his own way because he doesn't contribute anything, but yet doesn't do anything to piss everybody off.
Well, I think
enough,
too,
you know,
this could probably offend some people. I feel like he's rode on the coattails of John Belushi's memory for a long time. I mean, you know, and obviously he tragically died too soon.
Right, but. and even Chevy Chase too, and just by nature of being a Saturday Night Live guy too. I think it's just there's a lot of people in that original cast or those first few years that are not all that great, but have just stuck around. I mean, Eddie Murphy's another
somebody
one
like
of
Bill
those
Murray
me,
has you know transcended into being his own brand, and you know,
and Eddie Murphy was later, but that's another thing of like I feel like Eddie Murphy has coasted on that for a long time, and it's just kind of just like why are we still doing this? I don't know, or even 48 Hours or Beverly Hills Cop, you know, those movies. But like I don't know, there's that whole era of comedy is actually low key trash. Actually, when you really start like picking through who all's in it, it's like But anyway, so yeah, he's garbage. I kind of like him in this a little bit because it's like an open admittance of a lot of the movie's themes, and I feel like he's good enough for that. I do like that one scene where he's like, "We want Frosty." Like,
it's like making this demand like it's a hostage situation.
Nora, stop the car. Like, you know, it's like, and then like
so this doesn't explicitly take place in Chicago. It's just like in Illinois.
No, it's in Chicago.
Right? Okay,
I mean
like
it's
Chicago
it's like
suburbs. I guess. Okay,
like and then there's that scene where he's like trying to stop her, but she rolls the window up, and his gloves stay in the window.
Yeah,
and it's just like But anyway. Dava Halsey is Amanda Frohmeyer, the doting wife of Vic and loving mother of Spike. I don't remember her at all in this.
I don't know either.
So we're moving on. Julie Gonzalo, we talked about. M. Emmett Walsh as Walt Shield and Elizabeth Friends as Bev Shield. They're like the neighbors. The Bev character is like in remission from cancer or something, and she's like really nice, and everybody likes her. And then M. Emmett Walsh is like real annoying, obnoxious, like hates.
And he's
Tim
really
Allen,
more the mortal enemy of Tim Allen, even more so than
the ward boss. Yeah, right.
Ward boss. So
I think M. Emmett Walsh, well, first of all, he's great in everything, so it's like you can't really screw him up if you put him in something. But I feel like he's pretty good in
I will
this,
say, I think like towards the end, they have this whole scene where Tim Allen gives them his tickets.
Yeah.
And that is actually a genuine, I can't believe I'm saying this about this movie, a genuinely heartwarming scene,
Yes,
I
it is.
think.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, oh, that's actually nice. And like, doesn't feel too, and Chris Columbus has a good way with, you know, his Christmas movies in general, not making it feel too saccharine. It feels like it's earned. It's not like as cheap and and plasticky as a lot of these Christmas movies in general are. So that is actually I can't believe I'm saying this, but like a well earned emotional moment in this movie, is that and they're even like, can hate you, right? Or basically when he's walking away, he's like, oh yeah, fine, but but they
old man, stop that car. But yeah, that's actually one of the better parts of the movie, I think, and it's also by nature of Emmett Walsh being involved, I think. But, Eric Purse Sullivan is Spike Frohmeyer, Vic's son. That's that kid's on Malcolm in the Middle. I don't really know whatever happened to his career.
Said he's a former actor, and
yeah, it doesn't look like he does much now.
Stuff.
He's in a movie called 12 as Timmy.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe Dirt. I forgot he was Little Joe Dirt and Joe Dirt.
Oh, he had the mullet and everything. I remember.
Yeah.
We got any thoughts on Malcolm in the Middle?
Not really.
I mean,
it's a show that I watched a lot when I was a kid, and it has not stuck with me at all. Really,
I wonder how much it would hold up. Like
he's in Armageddon as Kid with Rocket Ship, uncredited.
Good for him.
The King of Queens as young Arthur. Episode Shrink Wrap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any bit. I mean,
I feel like he was really good on that show.
Yeah, actually. I mean, he played a very strange character in Kid, but was funny.
Like that kid's, like the kid from Hey Arnold, who's a
he just appeared out of nowhere.
Anyway, everybody's like, "What are y'all talking about?" Yeah. Anyway, in this, he's whatever. I mean, he's there.
You can tell it's like they cast him. That kid. Yeah. I mean, not much going on.
Cheech Marin and Jake Busey as the cops.
It was
Officer Leno and Officer Treen.
It was just a built-in cheap laugh, like, "Oh, Cheech Marin playing a cop," like,
"Oh, because he likes to smoke reefer." It's like,
okay.
I say no to reefer. Yeah, I mean they're barely in the movie. It's whatever. Honestly, Cheech Marin should have played more cops.
They were trying to sell those like calendars of like cops.
That's like a little bit weird.
Yeah, like it's like pin up calendars of cops.
Like gay panic, like this whole thing attached to that.
Well, there's more of that in the second,
which
movie.
Is strange. Yeah, which is strange, especially considering this was an Iraq War on Terror movie, to make police even look a little bit like they might be kind of weird. Is kind of strange.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. Austin Pendleton is Marty, an umbrella salesman who somehow knows everyone, who's actually Santa.
We'll talk about that more later.
So
that character, he's a daggum freak most of the time. He's like coming in and like knows all these
actually
random things.
Kind of like that character a little bit, but as far as other things he's in, Catch-22, you remember him in that at all?
Not really.
Okay, What's Up, Doc? The front page, the 1974 version of the front. I swear, if I hear of another version of the front page that has been made, I'm literally going to kill somebody. I'm tired of hearing about that movie. Move on.
His Girl Friday too, obviously.
Yeah,
an adaptation.
The Muppet movie, Short Circuit, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, My Cousin Vinny. Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, isn't that movie?
The Newman Woodward movie.
Yeah, that James Ivory movie. Yeah. My Cousin Vinny, Amistad, A Beautiful Mind, Finding Nemo. You know who else was in Finding Nemo was actually Eric Purse Sullivan. So a lot of Finding Nemo people hanging out. Literally right after that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, I actually kind of like his character, but yeah, it is kind of annoying.
He just looks annoying is the thing with me. I don't know. It's just like a hanger-on. Like, he's like the bug on the windshield. You keep thinking it's going to disappear. You keep moving it.
So maybe we'll come back to that in a little while. So yeah, he was okay. So then there's Tom Poston as Father Zabriskie, who this was his last role.
Okay,
I think he's actually most famous for being on Newhart, as like the kind of opposite character to Bob Newhart. He was in a lot of like old, well, actually not Skirts Ahoy, his first movie. Wow.
Skirts Ahoy,
Walk On. It's like Walk On, uncredited. Yeah. Old Dark House remake, Cold Turkey. That's a movie I always wanted to see all of. You remember that? Yeah, that's fun. Carbon Copy. Looks like he was on more
Probably
TV.
On a lot of TV.
Oh yeah, I'm not even gonna go through all this. It's all the same stuff you already know. It's like we're not even going through it. Anyway, he's like there's like a funny scene where they go to the tanning bed and he's like, Nora, like,
she's she's wearing a bikini.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like the scenes of the way I said that reminded me of Victor Freeze in Sub-Zero's like, Nora. But yeah, and it's like, he's looking her up and down, like,
or she's like feels embarrassed that the priest is seeing her like this, or whatever.
Kim Rhodes as Luther's employee. I don't know, nothing. She's Sweet Life on Cody. Sweet Life, Zach and Cody, Sweet Life on deck. Vernie Watson Johnson is Docs, Luther's employee. Also, not really sure. Welcome back, Cotter, I guess. I don't know. Arden Mirren is Daisy. I don't know. We're going to go through these quicker here. Renee Lavon, Patrick Breen, Carolyn Ray, Felicity Huffman.
Carolyn Ray was known as, she was on Sabrina the Teenage Witch,
yes,
I remember.
Yeah, I remember her in that. And Felicity Huffman, of course, and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Kevin Chamberlain, the most famous Huffman that I'm aware of.
Well, she's she's married to, right?
I don't remember.
William H. Macy.
Oh, that's right, because that was
I think they got caught up in the whole college scandal thing.
Yeah, right. Uncle Fester in the Addams Family. Oh, there was a show. Okay, so Kevin Chamberlain. I think I've seen him in something specific. Die Hard with a Vengeance. In and out, and in and out. Letters from a Killer.
Swayze?
Yes. Yes. Road to Perdition. I feel like I've seen him on some TV show at some point. I don't remember what it is. He's in it as like guy selling Christmas trees. Outer Range. Oh, that show. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
John Short and David Hornsby. I looked this up last night. David Hornsby is randomly the cousin of Bruce Hornsby.
Oh, okay.
Is like his kids.
Good
Mark Christopher Lawrence. He was in. Oh yeah, he's in Terminator 2. I remember him in that.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the neighbor that they take the tree from in that one scene. And my favorite character in the movie, David Lander, as Tanning Intruder. He was Squiggy on Laverne and Shirley. Many people would recognize. There's that scene there's a lot of stuff in the tanning bed that's going on randomly, but like there's that scene where like the door's unlocked and she's in the tanning bed and he's like, "Whoa, sorry!" Like you know,
this was the golden era of the tanning bed. I remember when tanning beds were big back more so in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, they were a big deal. I don't even know. I guess there's still a
thing now, but there's a lot more people that are wary of them or don't want to use them.
As they should be.
Yeah.
Trish Trogdon is Wes's wife, by the way. Rachel L. Smith.
So
anyway.
Again, let's see what we got here on the outline here. Vacationing during the holidays, ... a cardinal sin. That this movie treats it as such.
Yes. Well, and I want to. That's something a lot of people do, like we said. But it used to be, it was like we'll go to Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's Home Alone, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll go to Paris. We'll spend a holiday in Paris. But you take the whole family, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. Then you have a whole situation like what we did about like 15 years ago or more.
Around this time.
Is that we went to Disney World the few days after Christmas. So we had Christmas, then we went. Like, you know.
Or the next day, I think.
So, yeah. So, like, that stuff happens a lot, but this whole movie's like, oh, no, they're going to the Caribbean, and they're going to go on Christmas Day, and they're not going to celebrate Christmas at all. And so, yeah, there's an inherent, like, paganism to that.
I mean, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, but just something that's a little strange in the movie is, don't you think it's weird that, like, this family is being held up as the gold standard of, oh, wait a minute, we come to your house for Christmas. It's like, well, why aren't you all with your families? Like, why are you going to a neighbor's house?
Yeah.
And again, I think that just depends on the context of the community.
Part of that speaks to the films, or just in general, rather, society's expectations of Christmas. Well, you've always done this, and people get bored and into these traditions that they expect all these things, and if they don't get them, they freak out.
Yeah.
Like, you know. And it's like, yeah, oh my God, it's always a tradition. Like, who would want to hang out with the Kranks at Thanksgiving? I mean, I'm sorry, at Christmas, let alone Thanksgiving. Yeah. So
and I think it does speak to that generational thing that happens again with a lot of parents of a certain age when their kids move out and they're like, well, Christmas isn't the same for us, especially if they don't have grandkids yet. So it's like, well, why don't we just do something different? And oh, wait a minute, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Well, it would be fine if they did some other things, right? You know, but like he's like, nope, full ban, full boycott.
Yeah, I mean, he does go a little hard line about it.
Yeah.
So much so that you wonder if he's resented Christmas all these years, and now he's
he's like, look at all this money. Like,
yeah,
it's all this money that we spent. Like, you know. Yeah, I mean, and like that makes sense to a certain extent of, I want to go on a trip, but then it becomes about, we're going to get rid of all this stuff, and it's like, do any of those things have to do with Jesus, by the way?
Oh, well, yeah. I want to talk about that more with the next movie.
Yeah, especially that.
Yeah,
one, yeah.
but
it's like, none of those. Because it's like, are we gonna get? I will say this: the one thing that they give money to is some charity.
Yeah,
I actually like that. That the movie's like, oh no, yeah, we'll still do the charity, okay, but everything else, we're done.
Yeah, you would. I mean, again, I think the Community Act's way absurd and over the line, and again, fascist is the word you used for this. But at the same time, again, Tim Allen, he draws this big line in the sand too, where it's like, well, we're not doing any of these things. It's like, well, you wouldn't do anything leading up to it, not even for everybody else, but even just for yourself. I don't know,
right?
But
and like that's what's funny about.
I mean, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists,
right?
Era.
I mean, and it feels very much like, like literally those scenes early on where it's like, oh, I hear you're not doing Christmas.
How come you're doing
and
that?
It's like, how come you doing that? And there's this whole, like, all those scenes literally reek of fascism. That's literally what fascism is. Like, honestly, if I could teach that to kids, if they're like, what is fascism? I'd literally be like, watch these scenes.
I mean, this movie's only 2 or 3 degrees removed from the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Yeah.
The Twilight Zone episode,
And just that idea of, well, you're not doing this thing that we all do, and you need to do that, and we're not going to feel complete unless you do that. That's literally what fascism is, of like that whole idea of you all need to conform, and if you don't do that, you will be publicly shamed and or executed, literally.
Terminated,
and so, in that way, like I said, I feel like the kernel of the movie is a great idea, and I feel like if you would have done it genuinely, it'd be a little more interesting. But it just becomes a PG comedy, ultimately. Which is strange for a movie that in the opening scenes, when he decides that he is going to do this, that they're going to have sex on the kitchen table, is the implication that she is getting from that.
Right, yeah.
It isn't even Saturday night. Like, live from New York, it's Saturday night! Like, if only Dan Aykroyd would have ran in and said that early on.
What could have been. We already answered the question. We had written this down in the outline. Was his daughter worth the hassle? I don't think so.
No.
Again, I admire her work in the Peace Corps, but
and there's
the
that
fact
scene,
the whole community just stops.
There's the scene where Austin Pendleton is in it early on, and he's like, "Oh, Blair, yes, Blair." Yeah. It's very much like, oh, she's definitely on the nice list. It's just like, give me a effing break. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I mean. And okay, do you want to talk a little bit about this whole Austin Pendleton thing, or do we want to say more about Blair? I feel like we've talked. I feel like Blair has been talked about enough. We're going to move on from that. All right.
So again,
I want you to explain this, what your whole thoughts on this are again, because I'm still confused
Austin
about
Pendleton
it.
is Marty,
yes,
who turns out to actually be Santa Claus. Okay, so I have a random beef with movies about Santa. So. In the world of the narratives.
Yes.
That in the reality of the narrative, like, Santa Claus is actually real.
Yes.
But there's always, like, adults who doubt this. Oh, Santa's not real. Presumably because they were told Santa was real as a kid, but then, as in our real reality, parents or whoever eventually say, you know what, Santa's not real. That's a thing, a little myth we played with to make you appreciate the holiday season or make it fun. Yeah. And then so, like all of us, the characters are like, okay, fine. They grow up. And of course they wouldn't believe Santa was real because they were told Santa was not real. But then in these movies, I can think of a bunch of them. Let's see. The Santa Claus movies to an extent. Where, like, say, Judge Reinhold's character, who is the, like, the new husband to the ex-wife of Tim Allen's character. Of, like, him being told Santa, oh, actually, I'm Santa Claus now, Santa's real, and being like, Santa's not real, and then, like, being proven wrong.
Yeah, or Miracle on 34th Street, or Elf, or
Elf's
whatever.
Another one, like I said. So, like, whatever happened in these movies, where if Santa's really, really real in them, why they were told Santa is not real anymore. Because they all deal with this idea that
are you saying that because it's like there's the whole question of, well, then where did the presents come from if you didn't buy them? Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Well, like, presumably, like, the presents would have come from the parents admitting Santa's not real.
So then what does Santa do?
Right.
Right.
And then you think, okay, So the parents are telling kids Santa's not real. Was Santa really real to them? I don't know. It's just a logical thing. And I know a lot of people listening to this right now saying, who cares? It's just a movie. It's just a narrative. I don't necessarily think this is a real problem with the narratives. I'm not saying that. It is just, and again, I don't really get caught up in a lot of these logical things in movies. I just kind of usually accept it. Oh, it's movie logic, whatever. But this is just something that kind of gets on my nerves because it's like, specifically with Elf, it's like, Santa's sleigh is powered by people's belief in Santa Claus. It's like if the belief's strong, then the sleigh
it's actually
can fly.
A good idea. That movie overall is pretty
it's
good.
Fine. Yeah, it's
whatever.
good.
But no, I don't love it as much as other people do. But
and it's already
it's like a religion.
That's a movie that we have seen over the course of our lives become a Christmas classic too. I mean, I remember when it was a new movie that just came out. And it's good, but I mean it.
Yeah, it's a kind of random. Yeah, but so I think I understand what you're saying now is like, so they believed as a kid that he was real.
But then they were told by their parents Santa's not real.
But then they eventually learned that he is real.
So then it's like, well, why is this happening?
Are the people lying?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is just another version of this.
Yeah.
Honestly, it doesn't even play with this concept in this movie as much as it could have.
Right.
It's just kind of, oh, by the way, he's Santa. It's just kind of thrown in there ultimately. It's just like, okay, whatever. But I don't know. Again, that's not a real criticism.
And he can speak Spanish. And it's like, which of course he would be able to if he were Santa Claus.
But I don't think this is a real problem. Like, it doesn't make the movie worse or anything, or any of those movies worse. It's just a logical thing I've always scratched my head at. Just like, okay, so if they don't believe Santa's real because presumably he's not, and then it's proved he is, who told them he wasn't real, and then why did they do that? You know what I mean? I just don't quite get it. Maybe one day there'll be a Christmas movie that actually answers this question. I don't know. But again, I know it's just like an archetypal thing that's just done. But I don't know. I'm just confused by it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I guess now that you
kind of ultimate, we should remember that the author of the ultimate, that's how I found out that there was no Santa Claus, was Chris Columbus himself in Gremlins, that whole monologue that Phoebe Cates' character gives. One of the most horrific things to ever be described or elaborated on in a Christmas movie in any way. And I'm talking about somebody who's seen Black Christmas too. But again, that's one of the most disturbing aspects of that whole movie, Gremlins, is that whole sequence.
Yeah, something.
Anyways, final thoughts on Christmas with the Cranks. I think, again, bad but benign,
but a very light bad that has, I think, some very interesting things and
a kernel of a good idea,
right? But doesn't follow through on any of it though, totally like it could,
right?
So
all right.
It's actually not. I actually kind of like it in its own way, surprisingly.
Well, we liked it even more after this next movie.
I think that's part of it, is that we watched it, and it was like, and then we saw this, and we were like, oh my God, that is like The Godfather compared to this. I mean, this is, I'm not even just saying this.
This is the Tokyo story of this podcast of Christmas movies.
I'm going to say this now, before we even get started. This is quite literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen, is Deck the Halls.
Well, we said this already. It's the worst movie we've talked about on this podcast as a featured subject.
But don't let us tell you. Let the trailer go ahead and clue you in to how bad it is.
Here is the trailer for Deck the Halls.
In the peaceful town of Cloverdale, Dr. Stephen Finch was Mr. Christmas.
This is a busy time of year, so we have to have a game plan. All must-sing caroling requests to be submitted in writing.
Until the competition moved in.
Who moves in the middle of the night?
I'm Buddy Hall. We just moved in across the street.
These are my babies. Can I live here?
Daddy, come look. You can see every house in the country from space.
Where's our house?
You can't see our house.
Just hoping that one day I'd do something big. Buddy.
Around here, I'm the Christmas guy.
I don't think so.
Now they're going head to head.
Watch and learn.
For the holidays.
That's gonna swell up.
But the holidays
Got the next 5 years of trees all lined up.
How'd you like to chop it down with my chainsaw?
might not be big enough
Does anyone smell gas?
for the both of them.
I guess I'm the new Christmas guy. This isn't over yet.
You're gonna cut his power, aren't you? SpongeBob, this is SquarePants.
What?
He's coming! This is the best Christmas ever.
We're gonna settle this like men.
They're acting like a bunch of 12-year-olds.
You want lights? I'll give you lights. Oh, gosh. Oh! You sure you've been watering that thing? It went up awfully fast.
This November.
You're gonna stand here and you're gonna work it out.
Now that is something we could agree on.
Hey, baby, who's your daddy?
Dad?
Oh, God. I'm your daddy. I'm your daddy.
Regency Enterprises presents Danny DeVito.
I really want my house to be seen from space.
Matthew Broderick.
I like the way you've duct taped the antlers to their heads.
Apparently, reindeer are not indigenous to the region. Whoa! I didn't see that coming.
In the brightest Christmas story ever.
Santa! He's real! I knew it!
Oh, boy!
That could have ended badly.
Deck the halls.
Where are my clothes? I had to get your body temperature up, so I zipped us into this sleeping bag. Trust me, it works.
Now, if you told me on
about
paper,
that too, is that it's like the guy like deck the halls. Like that voice is like very like 2000s.
If you told me on paper that the movie that had Matthew Broderick and Danny DeVito in it was going to be the worst movie, of the two, I'd be like, really? I don't know, but wow, wow. I want this to prompt actually randomly a bigger discussion of Matthew Broderick, who I've got some questions about. What's Deck the Halls about, Levi? Give us the deets.
Oh, Lord. All right. Deck the Halls is a 2006 American Christmas comedy travesty, directed by John Weitzel, who is a friend of the pod, director of C-Spot Run, so I don't know
Which
what.
seems like, like Umbrellas or Cherbourg compared to this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Written by Matt Corman, Chris Ord, and Don Reimer, and starring Danny DeVito, Matthew Broderick, Kristen Davis, Kristen Chenoweth. Look at that picture of Matthew Broderick, by the way.
Is that like from the late 80s or early 90s, maybe?
I don't know. It looks like he's way too young for what he would be. 2012. Are you kidding me?
Really?
Yes.
He looks younger than he did in this movie. In that, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, he does. Yeah. It's the glasses, I think, part of it. Released November 22nd, 2006. Probably the second worst thing to ever happen on November 22nd. Maybe actually the worst.
I was thinking that when I saw that. I don't know if we said anything about that. No, we did actually. I think But I, when I saw the release date, I was really like, "Wow, this is the second worst thing to happen on that day."
Yeah, right. Maybe even worse. I don't know. Right? No, I know. Objectively.
Yeah.
But really. All right. So this movie. Okay. So what I love about this is it doesn't even have a summary at the top. So I'm just gonna have to explain it. So it's basically about like Matthew Broderick in living in Cloverdale, Massachusetts as a dentist. Or no, sorry, an eye doctor, even better. He's the Christmas guy, okay?
Yeah.
Christmas is like his thing.
He owns the holiday.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. No, I was just going to pull up the quick.
No, I know.
This is just the sentence-long description. Two neighbors have it out after one of them decorates his house for the holidays so brightly it can be seen from space. That right there, one of them decorates. It's not even like he's trying to compete and do that too. No. Which is like this narrative inertness this movie suffers from.
Right, because there glows the neighborhood. I mean, that's the name.
But get back to Matthew Broderick.
He's the Christmas guy.
Yeah, nobody can.
He literally has like his own area, his own like little domain at the Christmas tree farm that he grows Christmas trees.
That is one of the most randomly absurd things in this movie. It's like so there's the Christmas tree farm and he goes and they have a special section for him. It's like,
and it's
why?
Like, and he's growing like 5 years worth of trees already.
Yeah.
And like the way he's walking up like a little prissy boy with the like axe that he's gonna cut down
like,
one of them.
That time of year again.
Look at me and my special area, like
I mean, Danny DeVito.
It's like you literally killed someone in a car crash, huh?
We'll get
How
to
about that?
We'll get to that later.
Mel Gibson would say.
Danny DeVito, you like we like Danny DeVito, we love Danny DeVito, but like it's the movie wants us to root against his character, right? Like it wants to present him as like the villain of sorts. But Matthew Broderick is like downright very unlikable in this movie. So much so, like,
who's your daddy? Hey, who's your daddy? It literally sounds like a 5-year-old.
I'm your daddy. I'm your daddy.
I'm your daddy. Oh, we're going to hell. Oh, please.
But like
the only time that church is ever mentioned, by the way.
All right, so let's get into this. Let's go through the cast. Matthew Broderick. This is the biggest discussion to have about this movie.
It's Buddy Hall. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Dr. Steve Finch.
I feel like when you say Matthew Broderick, what do you first think of?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
But
you know what I also actually think of are the, and I'm not just saying this, the Kenneth Lonergan movies, which I feel like is a big part of his whole career, honestly. I mean, like...
well, he's specifically...
what do you want me to go ahead and say it?
Yeah.
From that scene in You Can Count on Me, there's that scene in that movie where, like, he's the bank owner, and he has this, like, weird relationship with... Holly Hunter, or is that her name? I always get her mixed up with
oh gosh, I'm gonna feel so stupid when I can't remember this name.
We'll get it there anyway. Where the main character in that movie, who is Laura Linney.
I apologize. I knew it was another alliterative name.
Yes,
is what I was.
So Laura Linney's character is like has some weird affair with her. And then she's like, starting to make demands at the job. She works at a bank.
Yeah.
He's like, well, just take over the whole bank, why don't you?
It sounds like really a characterization in a Christmas play, the church Christmas play.
It's almost. Literally him, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, him and Margaret is kind of
guys,
funny.
What are we doing?
But, so he's like an English teacher in that. I think he's genuinely really good in that movie, and the way that movie positions him, that character's relation to the narrative. Right. I think he's genuinely really good in.
Yeah. Meanwhile, him or Kenneth Lonergan in that movie is like the dad's like, how are you? Like, I clearly don't want to be talking to you. By the way, also him in
Manchester
You Can Count on Me,
Oh.
where he's like the priest or whatever, and there's that scene where he's talking to Mark Ruffalo, and he's like, now, I am not what you would call Mr. Successful, but what I am... It's just we love Kenneth Lonergan a lot, I gotta say, so yeah, it's just hilarious, but his whole... And then him also in Manchester by the Sea, where he's like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, why are you talking to him like that, or whatever? Yeah. And he's like, hey, F you!
They're childhood friends, I think.
Yeah. But anyway, that's so he's been in a lot of his movies. But... yeah, it's weird because Matthew Broderick has entered a whole phase of his career that he's continued to be in where it's like, he was like, ooh, the cool kid, like, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but then quickly became a middle-aged fuddy-duddy weirdo.
Now, a movie like Election is the perfect
yes.
moment and distillation of that. Yes. Because that narrative uses that to its...
Executive? Legislative? Judicial. Do you ever feel like that?
Oh, no, literally. Well, I've taught civics for the first time this semester, and there was a time or two where I didn't have that on the board exactly like that, but I was talking about them, and I didn't bring it up to the kids, of course, because they have no clue what this movie is. But I was thinking about, oh my God, I'm like that character now, which I'm not at all. I'm not. I'm not rigging high school elections and that,
or like having affairs with women, or like feeling like on the side of your friend who had an affair with a student. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that might actually be randomly one of the most evil characters in any movie ever is Matthew Broderick in that movie, because he faces some consequences for his actions but never learns from them. Ultimately.
I'm a huge fan of Election. I actually have an idea of a double feature with that and something later, so we're probably going to talk about that movie more in depth later.
Right.
But that and The Cable Guy, which we've talked about a while back on this pod, are both really great. Like, what can we do with this version of Matthew Broderick? Mm-hmm. This version is just a total wet blanket, like, and again, we're like, when I say, like, we are like, me and you, and the lifestyles we lead would be labeled conservative, like, lifestyles, not conservative politically, but like, we go to church, we abstain from alcohol and drug use, like, there's something about Matthew Broderick in some of these movies like this, especially this one, where it's like, okay, we are a version of this world, or this kind of, or could be a version of this man in the future. But the overwhelming lameness of him, the overwhelming, like, ability to, like, claim a holiday as his own and, like, be all
He's just an
prissy and
a-hole,
mad
too.
and an a-hole,
Yeah, right.
conceited,
Yeah.
like, and not in a way that's all that like compelling. It's not like a What About Bob situation where it's like, we got Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss's character. How Richard Dreyfuss is like the normal guy, but actually it's revealed as the psychotic, like actually more unhinged than Bill Murray character. Like it just makes him look mean and just like just waste of space and not really all that much charisma poured into this role.
No.
And again, I feel like there's a certain inertness with this Broderick appeal, which is, I will say, downright shocking to me that this is the same person who played Ferris Bueller, one of the most lovable, charismatic, and I know you have your whole idea about how lovable Ferris Bueller is, and I would mostly agree with that.
But the movie's great, and like the point of but that fits that movie. I think that character,
But Ferris Bueller is so unassuming, so cool, and it's like it's its own random reflection on like latter Gen X or early Gen X, that this is what happened with that generation
and strangely,
of man.
I feel like it happened with The Cable Guy or some other movies in the 90s where it's like, oh, let's make Matthew Broderick be that, but then he became that, and that's always been since then.
Again, I think Cable
he
Guy
got strangely
and Election
then typecast again, but that has stuck.
Right.
Like the opposite, like say.
So again, he is just so unlikable in this movie. Which again, the movie wants us to root against Danny DeVito.
With Election, and this is because it's Alexander Payne making an adaptation of a Tom Perrotta novel. So we've got a lot of great minds putting themselves together here.
Yeah.
Unlike the 3 screenwriters this movie has, who can't figure a daggum thing out about it ever.
Well, I remember when we first saw that in the beginning.
Yeah,
we were like, uh-oh. And that already we're like, all right, this is going to be...
Yeah.
Who's
your daddy? But the fact that...
and again, Lonergan, his version of Matthew Broderick, like, he kind of sees this too, but he's like...
Yeah.
But
with Election, it's like the same sort of performance, but it's a lot more unassuming, but he is so compelling, even when he's unlikable.
Yeah.
Is so interesting. And,
that's a character that's more like...
And more realistic.
And morally fraught and like, on paper, a good guy, but actually like pretty horrific, awful person. But this in theory is that, but it's just like... But again, it's rated PG.
Right.
And so, weirdly... In a PG movie like this, when you do those kind of qualities, it almost comes off as more shrill than if you made the R-rated, like, more human compelling version of these.
Just thinking of different parts from Election, that part where the dad's like, fed up,
off screen.
And then that scene where he's like, gonna go have that whole affair, and he gets stung on the eye, and he's like, ow! It makes a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Ow!
And in Cable Guy, he's more like straight-laced kind of guy, but he's the foil to Jim Carrey's insanity, you know what I mean? And in this, he's apparently like, he's the foil to Danny DeVito, but it's just not a good match. Like, they should have had... I think Matthew Broderick's, even though it weirdly fits into all these other things we've said, weirdly miscast.
Well, and we've go back to Margaret for a second. We were actually talking about this just the other day. I mean, and we've talked about this a lot, but how that scene in the movie... he's a teacher in that, too. There's a scene in the movie where a student is giving him a reading of the poem, of what they think the poem's about. And he's like, no, that is not at all what this is about. This is what it's about. And the kid's like, well, plays all cool. And that a lot of people walk away from that movie thinking, oh, the kid's right. And Kenneth Lonergan's like, no, actually, the teacher's right. But what I think so interesting about that is that Lonergan can make us feel this contempt for the teacher because of Matthew Broderick's performance, is that he's so lame.
Come on, guys,
shrill.
as you said earlier.
Like you said, that moment where he's in the middle of all that and he's like drinking his cup of tea.
Got like, well, it's like,
coffee.
I think it's like a little like orange juice, like kind of school thing,
Right.
but it's got a straw out of it, so it's like.
Yeah,
it's like
while
so
he's
dumb
talking,
and pathetic, and it makes us like go, "Wow, this guy."
Yeah, and but
what a
with
loser.
both Election, this You Can Count on Me, and Manchester by the Sea, you see that person and you know exactly who that person is. It's like and I feel like we think more about that because, like you said, it feels like people we know or like even versions of ourselves in its own way. But like I said. So it's just he has such a strange career. It's literally one of the weirdest.
Well, don't you think that this movie, in theory, is trying to use that screen persona, but it's just not well suited ultimately?
Who's your daddy? I'm just gonna keep saying that at this point, but
I mean, it at least got us the moment in cinema history for him in that voice to say that.
SpongeBob to SquarePants. Okay, SquarePants. Like so. Lame.
And again, the part of the narrative inertment of this movie is that like. He's more trying to sabotage his neighbor than, like, compete with the neighbor.
Yes.
That just doesn't really work narratively. I don't know.
Well, it's more realistic, I think, in its own way.
Yeah.
To just be... But that's what I'm saying. It's like, both of these movies should have been made with a more seriousness to them. But also, if you do it that way, the same movie that we have here, you get Cable Guy again. Is ultimately what you get. Even though it's about something different, you're still getting the insane, crazy Batman villain against Matthew Broderick.
I do think that this calls more for an R version than even the last one did.
I think it could.
You know, let's talk about Danny DeVito a little bit, too.
Okay, so Danny DeVito's Buddy Hall. You can take Toe Jam Day. You take the lead on DeVito here.
Well, we love Danny DeVito. Yeah. He's been around for forever.
Don't love him in these new Jersey Mike's. Jersey Mike's, a sub above, as he says. No, not.
We've not really watched hardly any. It's Almost Sunny in Philadelphia. I know a lot of recent generations.
It's Almost Sunny. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Is that what I said?
No, you said It's Almost Sunny. That's what I like that better. That would be even better. It's Almost Sunny in Philadelphia.
But a lot of more younger generations, they mostly associate him with that. Love Danny DeVito. I think he's...
Director of Matilda.
Yeah.
And Throw Ma from the Train.
And War of the Roses,
which is just so random.
He randomly was a good director. I mean, he made some good movies.
Hoffa. I mean, not a bad movie, I gotta say.
And F your brother. What
did you say? I mean, who's your daddy? I mean...
Which, again, I'm going to find any opportunity not to talk about this movie that I can.
Yes.
Very famously, PTA was taking a screenwriting class and, like, took a scene out of Hoffa and just, like, took the name off of it and, like, turned it in as a screenwriting assignment. And it got,
David
like, a C-. And he's like, well, if this got a C-, then I'm leaving. This all sucks.
David Mamet, who is really fallen from grace.
Which, again, there's the time where he was a good quality writer. But,
well, he's made it personal towards us. That's all I'll say. But,
yes.
Yeah. And you know what we're talking about if you know anything about us. But
it's
totally
with
ridiculous. Anyway, sorry. I'm just...
I think DeVito is the right...
Remember how, by the way, just a second. Do you remember how bad House of Games was?
No.
That movie literally sucked so bad.
And it has like this reputation of being good, and I'm like, why?
Literally, I saw everything in that movie coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
It's just like, it thought I was the mark, if you can. But no, that movie's so bad. Screw David Mamet. Anyway.
Anyways, DeVito, I think he's like mostly right for this role.
Yeah.
The problem is he doesn't have somebody to play off. I mean, who knows? Like, you could have even went older with this, with the Broderick part, and got like a Christopher Lloyd. They've worked together in the past. I mean, you know, like something that just invites more of.
You need to turn off all your lights.
You need to turn off your lights. Yeah, that's not Bernie Sanders.
Turn that light off, babe. Like.
The top one of the top 1% says you need to turn your light off.
Who's your daddy? Like, you know.
The Green New Deal means you need to turn your light off. But I think he's right for this. But him and Kristen Chenoweth as a couple. What are we doing with that?
And it's like, he was hanging around watching her be painted nude.
Yeah.
And it's just like... Again, and then his daughters are like these sex pots, too. And again, these twin daughters.
Something very strange happens with like movies like this that are PG, but then they go for these moments and gags, and it's like, what are we doing with this? Like, who is this for? Like, if you're going to go that way, go ahead and make it PG-13 or R, but this whole like, it's PG, but then it's got this stuff, this suggestive stuff in it, I just don't get it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And again, like, Kristen Chenoweth in general is, I think she's mostly right for the role that's here, but her and DeVito together is, I don't know, is...
Yeah.
It seems
Can we go
very
back
strange.
to the who's your daddy moment?
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, let's talk about who's your daddy moment.
Yeah. Who is your daddy? Who's your father?
Like, look out,
Yeah.
you know, senior moment, who's your daddy moment. The part in that, though, the whole implicitness of that is they go to this Christmas dance competition, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So they go there, and, like, their impulse to get along is to be like, let's be these lecherous old men.
Yeah, right.
That's their
common ground.
Right. He's like, oh, come on, you can get into this. He's like, yeah, like, and it's just like, and they say all these things in front of the whole town. This is even before they know it's their daughter. It's already weird.
Yeah, you'd think
like,
specifically
their
Broderick,
daughters.
he'd have this reputation to protect
And
or
he's
something.
just like he ain't getting enough sleep, I guess, because of the lights, so he's totally lost his deed mind. Like, but that he's just like, literally like, oh yeah, who's your daddy? And just that whole, and literally saying that out in public, that's just like a whole other level of disgust and depravity.
Yeah.
That I feel like the movie itself does not comment. Like it was fine until it was their kids.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, it
yeah.
could be somebody else's daughter, and I'll talk that way.
Right.
But when it's mine,
and the movie says that. That's
Yeah.
what the movie's implicitly saying.
Yeah.
This is a PG movie.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
I mean, but yeah, okay, so the DeVito
Shocking,
character,
yeah.
well, actually, I want to come back to that in a bit when we talk about their relationship. And yeah. But, okay, so let's go through the cast real quickly here, because there isn't much else to say. Kristen Davis is Kelly Finch, literally a nothing burger of all
She's in
time.
Sex and the City,
Sex
yeah.
and the City, primarily, literally has nothing to do, because she's not even like Jamie Lee Curtis in Christmas with the Kranks, who gets a lot of screen time.
And
like,
that movie inherently gives her more situations,
Yes.
and actually it cares about her more as a character.
Right. But Kristen Chenoweth is Tia Hall. Randomly, a whole aspect of her in the movie is that she has this specific heirloom vase that is a lot like the weird doll in Home Sweet Home Alone, it reminds me of like, there's a lot of money that can be made off this MacGuffin, basically.
Yeah. Well, don't you feel like it's setting that up as some real big thing, and it's like barely a plot point in the fact of DeVito sells it to get more money to pay for the lights or whatever,
right.
but ultimately is not nearly exactly the MacGuffin you think it's going to
be. But yeah, I don't know. And then it's funny how like she and Kristen Davis immediately get along, and they're like, oh, they're both acting like children. Like
there is one line that is kind of funny in the movie. They said something like, "Why can't they just be passive aggressive and smile like us or something?" I don't know if it's something along the lines of like, "Oh, we maybe really don't like each other, but at least on paper we're putting up with it."
But who is your daddy?
You know what would be more interesting? It's this. This is the same movie, but it's two women feuding. And their husbands are actually on the sidelines and actually maybe get along.
On the sidelines in a cast.
Yeah.
As,
but you know what I mean?
Don
like,
McClane once sang.
It kind of shows you, it's like, why couldn't women have led a movie like this? Oh, it's the dads, the husbands that compete. Women can be just as competitive over Christmas as men can.
In that, this is random, but it's like in that show The Gilded Age, which was on. And it's like you used to see, I mean, you saw in that how many, like, we have this specific luncheon, and it's like then the women feud over that, and the men literally show up, smoke cigars, and are nice until their business interests get in the way, and that's when they literally lead each other to suicide.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
but honestly, I think now I'm realizing it, I can't believe we haven't said this already. I think that's one of the central problems of the movie is this should have maybe or could have been two women or wives feuding or mothers feuding, and then the whole families get caught up in that. But whatever. But the impulse is natural. Oh no, it's men have to be the lead of this. But.
Yeah. Aaliyah Shawkat as their daughter.
She's been in lots of things
as Matthew Broderick's daughter. Yeah.
Search Party is a show she's recently on, and I really like the first season of it.
Yeah. And then she was in Green Room. As far back as she was in Three Kings.
Was she also in Arrested Development?
I don't.
Maybe I'm thinking
know.
of. Go down to television.
I do not know. Yeah, she's in a lot of that. Okay.
Yeah, I figured she's one of the main
actually.
characters.
I did not know this. Part Iraqi.
I think I did know that. Yeah.
So she's part Iraqi and then Norwegian, Irish, and Italian. So that's her name. That would make sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it says Three Kings, Amir's daughter, and I started thinking, oh, was she like Middle Eastern or something?
Yeah.
So, Bart got a room. What the hell?
Who's in that?
What is this?
Who's all in
William
there?
H. Macy, Aaliyah Shawkat, Stephen Kaplan, Cheryl Hines. Literally, look at that poster.
Yeah, that's random. See, William H. Macy's like...
Yeah, that's the best part of it, I think. Anyway, she's also in, let's see, Life After Beth, one of the all-time names for anything.
He was Big Holiday.
Nasty Baby.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 20th Century Women, let's see, Green Room we mentioned, First Cow, Woman with Dog. Yeah, it's at the very beginning of the movie. She's like, you remember that?
Yeah.
Like, the very beginning, like, oh, I'm in this. It's like, okay. She was herself in Jackass Forever.
Well, okay.
Gonna be in Pussy Island.
Oh, the
Zoe Kravitz
yeah,
film.
new Zoe Kravitz thing.
All-time name. She was on Jag. Veronica Mars. Adventure Time. Anyway,
I didn't know who she was when I would have seen this years ago. Yeah. Now I'm watching. Anyway, she's like, by the way, Matthew Broderick's daughter.
And then her brother is Dylan, a kid named Dylan Blue, who doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. But I'll look. The only other movie he's in is Patty Cakes. That movie, that like
you're looking this up the
white female obese rapper movie or whatever
from a few years ago.
Which which I randomly want to see. I felt that movie. I have a sneaking suspicion that movie has a massive cult following that is very silent.
Yeah.
By the way,
you saying you want to join that?
I mean, if it's good, I'd accept it. But Jorge Garcia is Wallace. Of course, was in
Hurley
Lost and was on a Weezer album cover.
That's one of the funniest things ever. There's a picture of him on that.
Yeah. I want to look that up real quick because I always forget that, and then I'm like, wow, he's barely in this. The last two people I want to mention are Fred Armisen and Gillian Vigman as Gustav and Gerda, as these like German or like northern or like Scandinavian, like
vaguely European, just
like couple who like love to ice skate.
Yeah. Now, I'm a big fan of Fred Armisen in a variety of things. Hurley's the name of the album.
Oh, it literally is. Okay,
that's what it said.
Wow, that's literally the laziest picture ever.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, what do you think of their characters in this movie?
It's so random, so ham-fisted. And again, I'm a big fan of Fred Armisen. This is the same around the same time as his character in Anchorman, if you remember. That was like he's like, you will eat cat poop, like, you know.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah,
that's him.
And then he feels bad about it. And he's like,
"Oh, eat the ass, I don't care."
And he's like, "Get this man steak,
big steak for him." Like,
yeah,
but he had this whole thing of like, and still kind of like playing vague at nationalities and ethnicity.
Poop out of your mouth. Moment, yeah. Anyway,
and it's just like, I get, he himself, I think, comes from, might be like Middle Eastern heritage. I can't remember. Let's see. What does it say?
Briefly lived in Brazil, it says.
Okay.
Yeah, Venezuelan.
Maybe it was Venezuela. Okay. So.
And his father's part German. I don't know. It's all really confusing. Anyway. Yeah, and then his family is kind of part of the Korean aristocracy.
Okay, just throws an even bigger wrench in everything that I didn't even know about.
Right,
okay.
I don't know. Anyway.
But I like Fred Armisen in a lot of ways, but especially he's gotten better with age in terms of things he's been in and his own.
Honestly, post SNL, he's been better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're big fans of him specifically being in Documentary Now. Some of the characters he plays in that I really love, and I like. I've not seen all of it, but I really like what I've seen of Portlandia, and he's funny in that. So, again, I don't know. Those characters feel so.
You remember him on Los Spookies?
which got canceled recently. I know.
Really?
There's only
that's a
season
shame.
2. It just finished.
I wanted to watch that because it's
at least 2 seasons of it.
But there's that scene I remember. There's some scene of him like in it. I don't even know what was going on in the show.
Yeah.
But it was like him being interviewed, and he was like, "See, like that," and it just made me laugh.
That show, interestingly, like is in Spanish and in English, and whatever the other language is, it gives subtitles in those scenes.
Right.
And so, yeah.
But anyway, that I want to go back and watch that. But yeah, that whole thing in this movie seems so random, so out of nowhere.
You can tell it's like, we need a kooky foreign characters. It just screams of that. And it's just like, okay.
Anyway, last thing actually, Gary Chalk as Sheriff Dave, the cross-dressing sheriff.
Okay. Oh yeah. What else has he been in?
Well, this is actually somebody else I'm looking about to make sure that's who I think it is. He has 2 R's in his name, by the way. He's British-born Canadian actor. Okay,
good for you.
Oh God. Godzilla, the newer Godzilla.
Okay.
Freddy vs. Jason. I'm about to fall asleep even looking at this Wikipedia page. A Christmas Story 2 is Santa Claus, direct-to-video, uncredited. Like, big-time movie is MI6 Agent Number 1. Power Rangers, that movie from a few years ago. Oh, my God.
There's something else.
Watchmen, Military General.
Wait a minute. That might be it. But Cats and Dogs 3, I didn't know there was a third Cats and Dogs.
There was. We just didn't look into it. 8 Below, I've seen that. Battle in Seattle. What? What the hell is that? I don't know. Bang Bang, You're Dead. Chief Bud McGee. The Karate Dog.
Cool.
Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. The new generation of superheroes.
What TV's he been in?
Super Volcano. TV, MacGyver. Oh, yeah, he was the coach in It.
I think that's what I'm thinking of. Like, I keep trying to figure out what he's in.
He was on the Outer Limits show, the remake of Outer Limits. Nick Fury, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as Timothy Aloysius Dum Dum Dugan.
He kind of looks like Dum Dum Dugan in the comics.
Stargate was on that Dead Zone show. A bunch of Transformers dubs.
Optimus Prime.
Yeah. National Lampoon's Thanksgiving Family Reunion.
We should check that out sometime. Or not.
Should we? I don't know. Let's see who all's in that.
Bryan Cranston.
Film, Bryan Cranston, Judge Reinhold, Penelope Ann Miller, Gary Chalk, as we said. Anyway, what do you think of this whole character in this movie?
So it's like, he's a pretty nothing character, but by the way, he might be a cross-dresser. He might be wearing women's panties. It's like,
yeah, because
why do I care about any
I'll
of this?
admit, there is that one moment where he bends down to get something, and the women's panties fall. I literally laughed. I did think that was genuinely funny, just of the image of him doing that,
and also just the why of it all.
Just like this is so dumb.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Oh, I didn't want to mention.
That's another thing. It's like, this is a PG movie.
Yeah.
If you want to be an R-rated movie, be an R-rated movie. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. But to be PG,
that was literally a Saturday or Sunday matinee crowd got some kids to laugh one time moment is what they were going for on that.
Yeah, and also like there's this, there's that, and then the whole thing about like Matthew Broderick like is gonna nearly freeze. And so Danny DeVito's in the back of his car with him, warming him up, and they're both naked under the sleeping bag together. And it's just like gay panic stuff across the board here, and it's just like, I know we're talking about 2006, but like just shameful homophobia in both of these instances in terms of just like gay people are weird, gay people are freaks. It's just so freaking stupid.
It's so old. It just gets old. Yeah. And other than the fact that it's just inherently bad, homophobic and just really mean spirited, it also just gets really old. It's not funny.
It's a cheap joke.
It's just not funny anymore.
And say what you will about Tim Allen's brand of humor, that's not popping up in these movies. His movies.
No, not
what
really.
I mean?
Yeah. Wait a minute. What? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's just effing dumb. This movie is so bad. So let's get into talking about why, some specifics. All right, so...
Well, we already talked about kind of that thing there, I feel like.
Yeah, well, okay, so I did want to talk more in depth about Danny DeVito's character, though, in general, because, like I said, it was a one-sided feud.
And so his whole character, he's like a salesman who's like...
Yeah.
It seems like he's really good at selling things, but he always racks up huge debts.
Yeah, because there's a scene where he, sells a car to the car dealer.
Which makes just no sense. I mean,
yeah.
It's like, why would he buy his own car at his own car
and I paid
dealership?
full ticket price. Like, what?
I feel like that's to get a cheap laugh, but again, you just think about that in any basic logical way, you're like, wait, why would he do that? It just makes no sense. Stupid. Anyways.
Well, what I was going to say is, his whole character... I don't ever know how to feel towards him because, early on, you have these scenes between him. At first, it seems like he's well-meaning and wants to get along with Matthew Broderick. But literally 5 seconds later, he's like, oh, no, I hate you. I will be the Christmas queen, basically. Yeah. And it's like... It literally, he goes back and forth on that.
Well, so it's like he's like, oh, this is what you love and care and passionate about? I will steal that from you.
Yeah, and it's like, at first he was just trying to be nice, genuinely.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you know what, I got you a car. Oh, actually, wait a minute, that's part of this whole joke where you have to pay for the car. Then it's like, oh, wait, and then there's the whole sequence also before that where they why don't you take a picture in the sleigh? And then it's, oh, the horses get loose because there's a loud noise and it scares them. And there's that great moment that we mentioned where Matthew Broderick is going over the road and the car below them stops, and it stops literally so quickly you can tell it's a green screen.
Oh, right.
But there's a lot of these sequences though where it's I never know what or how to feel towards him.
Again, all this reeks of three writers. It's like drafts upon drafts, and they're slamming together. And there's no narrative coherence or cogency. It's just like, let's just throw these.
And it's a very basic.
Together.
It's a very basic conflict that happens with him, this internal conflict of I am a small man, I must overcompensate with big lights.
And that's just never very said exactly,
and
but
stupid.
It's, right
yeah,
there,
and it's just I've never been able to really do anything. I must make my house seen from space. Also, by the way, there would just eventually be a city ordinance violation over, first of all, energy usage and light pollution.
Yeah.
And so that's just ridiculous. And just makes no sense. And like I said, what I remembered the movie as being is that they're competing back and forth about who can have the best lights. No, it's just he has the lights, and that's it. And then it's
it's not like Broderick's trying to outdo him. He's just trying to sabotage him.
Then you have the whole sequence where he's trying to sneak over there to destroy the fuse box.
And in the trailer, as you heard, it's like while he's dressed up in this Mission Impossible, gonna go all in. It's like playing the Secret Agent Man music. I'm sorry, if you're ever at a point where you're editing a trailer for your Christmas movie and you're realizing you're putting the Secret Agent Man music in the trailer, there ought to be 15 alarm bells going off. What the hell is any of this?
Yes.
So what are we doing here? Just it just makes no sense. And again, this, as we said, reeks of three different writers trying to shove drafts together. Say what you will about the failures Chris Columbus might have in Christmas with the Cranks. It has a momentum and a vision, and it's
it was also based on a novel, so that helps, I think. But this has 15 things going on in one scene all at one time.
Yeah,
none of which are good.
Yeah,
that's gonna swell up. Want me to blow it up? I mean,
this movie, yeah, sure, why not? Do we want to talk about the life lessons?
Oh, one thing I want to talk about is how he gets to the point. It says, I love this. Having had enough, Steve buys various fireworks, including the Atomic Warlord, a large illegal military-grade rocket from a gangster, and tries to destroy the Hall house. The rocket misfires, setting the town Christmas tree on fire, and Steve's family leaves, but not before Kelly scolds Steve for ignoring his children to focus on Buddy.
Cool.
So the morality, we'll get into that. I don't even have anything to say
The
about any of
Atomic
that.
Warlord.
I just wanted to mention that the Atomic Warlord exists.
Still somehow not as absurd as Adam's Family Reunion's
which is
ending.
displayed and sold in like a gun case, like in the like plastic cover or whatever. But anyway, the morality or life lessons.
So, as I was saying earlier, a writer like Chris Columbus, and again, Home Alone's written by John Hughes, which is literally one of the greatest screenwriters in the history of cinema. Has a way of mostly not making it feel as cheap and plastic as it ultimately usually is. Home Alone's not, but
because I was going to say I want to talk briefly about Home Alone because we'll talk about this eventually. But I genuinely think that the old man stuff in that is genuinely really great, and I think everybody agrees with that too, because that's one of those things of the movie that no matter what people think of the movie. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about that section of it.
Which could easily
which in any other movie would be the thing somebody would talk about.
Well, I think what's good about Hughes' writing in general when he's writing young people, and obviously Kevin's even younger than the teenagers that he's usually writing, is that he has a really great way to write movies about young people that isn't condescending towards young people, and that obviously when you're a kid, you don't feel like you got to know all the details as to why he's maybe outcast from his family, Snowplow Man. But you get older and you live your own life and feel in your own life experiences, and that stuff isn't explicitly handed to you, but you can understand it and read into it and know why or how that might have happened.
And like I said, it works because of the way he explains it to a child. It's we just don't get along.
Yeah.
And it's it doesn't matter what it is. And like I said, it's because John Hughes is one of the greatest screenwriters ever. It's just, he's just able to engender all of this out of nothing. There's no explanation that needs to be. He shows rather than explains. It's just very basic, And the ending of the movie is really great. It's just everything about that is so great,
and so
which is even worse in the sequel when it's the bird lady stuff.
The point I'm trying to make is Chris Columbus, for all his screenwriting talents, putting something like Gremlins together. He's still working with Joe Dante, too. He's not on the level of quite with John Hughes. He was a good director. I guess he's still directing things, not anything that's been all that relevant in a while, but he's a step down from Hughes, but he's still at least connected to that tradition to some extent. Again, then we get down to this level, and this level is where most lame-brained, dumb Christmas movies reside. And again, we're not all that caught up on the Hallmark canon, so to speak, in terms of Hallmark movies.
This could easily be a Hallmark movie. I mean,
apart from its weird eccentricities and hatefulness and absurdities in its own way, but I mean the cold candy-colored clown, this is not candy-colored clown time or crazy clown time.
Candy-colored clown,
but this whole plasticky. Oh, and again, we like.
Candy-colored clown. I'm just thinking about Blue Velvet now. Sorry. Anyway, a David Lynch Christmas movie. What would that even be? I wonder.
Think about that.
Yeah.
But
Charlie Rocket. What's that movie you want to make?
Charlie Rocket.
What's that movie?
What is it? It's something. Rocket Raccoon or something.
It's the dumbest sounding thing ever. Actually, genuinely, is that something? You keep going. I'll look it up here.
But we like Jingle All the Way, and we did it last year. But and we laughed about this on the pod. It's all about we got to get the gift, we got to get the new toy, and again, a lot of
the real Turbo Man at home.
I was building up to this,
Jimmy, I love you,
I love you,
and Borat another gay panic thing, but anyway,
but and so the whole this is the lesson. Oh, but we still get to engage in all of the mayhem, the holiday mayhem that ensues with, just the Christmas insanity. Yeah. And just a lot of these Christmas movies in general speak out both sides of their mouths. If you go right around Eraserhead, it might be after that.
Oh, look, you keep watching.
But I don't know. It's just... These movies
Ronnie Rocket.
Ronnie Rocket, okay, yeah. I think it's got its own Wikipedia page.
It does. I'm going there now. When it loads, dadgummit.
But again, these movies just speak out usually both sides of their mouth of it's not really about all the lights and all the glitter, But isn't it really, though? That's why we're here. That's why we go to see any of these garbage, basically. And again, we're Christians, and so we obviously look at Christmas through a more Christian, Christ-focused lens, obviously. But, I mean, there's a way to do a secular movie tastefully. Again, Home Alone's a good version of that. I would say the movie we're going to talk about next week's a version of that, but it's actually more explicitly religious, I would say.
But even specifically, even with Christmas with the Kranks, I mean, the stuff with M. Emmett Walsh and his wife in the movie is even still like, oh, this woman might pass away, let me give this. And it's about giving in a basic way.
Right.
I literally do not know what this movie is trying to say at the end. I do not get it.
Yeah, it doesn't give a crap about that or
I don't
anything
know.
else. Like,
oh, they get along by the fact of, oh man, we both pissed our families off.
Yeah.
And then the ending is like, oh no, let's all use our phones to light the way.
Oh, well, then also so their families are hanging out together in like a hotel room, right?
Yeah, it's like the families
then
are hanging
then
out.
they lead them back through little breadcrumbs of lights back to their homes. It's just like, why do I care at this point anyway? It's just like.
Yeah, because it's very basic. It's like family. It's like, what is this? A Sony leak? Like, what do you as far as like, oh, we just put the words on the board and expect me to care?
Yeah. Yeah.
God.
Tell me why.
Tell me why.
To any of this, please tell me why.
Yeah. But yeah, so then that movie ends, like you said, with like, oh, but it's not really about the lights. It's about the family. But then it's like, no, yeah, but you want to see the lights from space, right?
Yeah, and then it's like MTV's covering this live on there.
And then it's so bright that it just blows everything out,
Well, what I don't get is like, even this is going back towards the beginning, they're talking about like how his daughters are online looking at GPS technology, which was not like available for the general public at this time. Like, and we were like, surveillance state, all this stuff.
Yeah. And then we started talking about when was the Patriot Act?
Yeah. It was like actually weeks, almost a month after 9/11, something like that.
Almost like they had it all planned ahead of time. And that is not to say 9/11 was planned. Well, it was, but I'm saying they were predisposed to want to do that anyway.
Something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So U.S. government. But anyway.
But it's like, oh, all the other houses in the neighborhood you can see from space except ours, and then they like don't even put that many lights on, and it's already more than everybody else has. You can already see it from space if you're looking at it from the satellite technology.
Yes,
And so it's like, why do we keep upping the ante with this? I don't understand.
Well, you could probably, if you got close enough, see it from space anyway. If it's that much, I mean. Yeah, that just doesn't make sense. Like, but then it gets even brighter than Boston itself, because then it shows where Boston is.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and it's like,
it makes no sense. There is no logic to this movie
because it's clear that there's other town centers that are not as big as Boston, but are like pretty big in Massachusetts, like even Springfield.
Yeah, right.
And it's like. That you don't see, but
it gets to the point when even the people looking at the satellites are like, oh, right? It's like flashing on the screen.
Yeah.
It's just like, really, is that bright? It is that bright, literally, like that one house. Like, I don't know. I don't buy it. I gotta say, I don't buy this movie.
Yeah,
I don't buy what it's selling. I'm not a fan.
No, I mean, this is quite literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Again, reiterate, this is the worst film we've made the subject of the pod.
So. Good riddance. Goodbye.
I mean,
moving on.
I feel like Christmas with the Cranks is semi-remembered.
Yeah.
Or semi-watched here and there. This has just disappeared. And no wonder why. I mean,
Yeah, because we only rewatched it just because, we saw that. Yeah, we did.
I do think, and again, Christmas with the Cranks is, again, better. But, I mean, again, I don't want to shrug off its own problems either. It's not. It's definitely a flawed movie. But nonetheless, after we saw Deck the Halls, we're like, oh, wow, Christmas with the Cranks is not as bad as we thought. Any ideas or thoughts about these two paired as a double feature and what that means? Again, I feel like for me, it's its own postcard of mid-2000s lame-brained studio Christmas comedies. I mean, and that might sound like a very specific thing, but these kind of movies get made every year, and these just happen to be like two that were.
And now they get made even more in the Hallmark vein, like
or even on these streaming services.
Right? Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, tons of them.
I mean, because there's a whole. Christmas
even CBS
story.
has like been promoting some that they're going to put on. Like, it looks like a Hallmark movie, but CBS is like, oh well, we can do one of those,
right?
know?
I mean, and yeah, I mean, even that Christmas Story 2, Christmas. Christmas Story 2, Christmas. Your subtitle is the title, Christmas.
We didn't really plan to talk about this. What can be done with the Christmas narrative that hasn't been done by this point? Because I feel like it's an inherently kind of trite
Christmas Shoes, the movie
genre. Because I mean, it's kind of it's. And we talked about this last year, like what exactly is a Christmas movie, and is like, oh, is Die Hard a Christmas movie, or oh, is Eyes Wide Shut a Christmas movie? And it's like, no to both of those. But Home Alone, and we keep talking about how great Home Alone is. That's a great version of like a movie that works on its own, that you can actually hypothetically watch any time of the year because it kind of just stands as its own thing.
And it was so popular and so beloved that it maintains that. I mean, it's on TV throughout the year. We saw it here a couple months ago. It was on TV somewhere. Yeah, right. I don't even remember where it was, but like,
I think that's a credit just how good the movie is.
Yeah,
and we're going to reveal it here in just a little bit. One of the movies we're talking about next week is a Christmas movie, but most of the narrative actually does not take place at Christmas time.
Right,
and it's also just seen as one of the great classic Hollywood films.
About what it is,
you know what I mean? Right. And so it has all these contexts, and its director and its star also being part of their canons. Honestly, and this has
what
been,
did you wish when you threw that rock? I mean, yeah.
That one of the things I would like to see, and this is more like not a big picture thing, but a more specific adaptation. I'd really love to see an adaptation of The Corrections, the Jonathan Franzen novel, which to me is the ultimate like more dramatic Christmas story. And again, it's like it's a narrative that mostly doesn't take place during Christmas, but it's all about leading up to that Christmas holiday that year. Also love the Franzen novel Crossroads a lot, which is I think randomly a really great book that hasn't been all that much talked about last little bit year it came out. But I would honestly
think everybody's kind of tired of Franzen's whole attitude, so people kind of moved on.
Yeah, and again, I take issue with some of that myself, but I really love him as a writer outside of that. But I would also just love to see adaptations of that. Is there anything specific or broad that you think can be done with the Christmas movie that is lacking or wanting at this point in 2022?
Not really. I mean, I think versions of what you said is like more just serious versions of Christmas stories that.
I some people might disagree with this. Neither one of those narratives are cynical about Christmas itself. Right. I don't think. I mean, they have their own. I don't think either one of those stories are even just cynical. Period. But they are more dramatic, and I think a lot of people. There's a fine line of what people want from Christmas stories. The reason it's the greatest Christmas story of all time, other than the birth of Jesus, of course, Christmas Carol. Of course, versions of that have been made out the wazoo. The whole story of Ebenezer Scrooge and that transformation is one of the, again, more than just a Christmas story, one of the just great stories that have been told by humans in general. And I feel like, that is a good stand-in for what people want from Christmas stories. They want something sweet. They want something that approaches tragedy but ultimately has a redemptive arc or quality to it. But again, I would like to see, and again, everybody has their Christmas movies they want to watch every year. Again, Christmas Carols, Muppet Christmas Carol specifically is one of those for our family, as is Home Alone.
I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say we do not need another Christmas Carol.
I feel.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just say that.
Well, they always do.
The Jim Carrey version that got made, the Robert Zemeckis one, that was a good moment for me to kind of step away, push away from the table and go, I think we're fine, thanks with this for a while. I mean, there are also literally so many versions of it that everybody can pick and choose which one they want to really be behind.
Yeah,
I mean, there's even Scrooge, which is a take on it. There's, of course, the one from the 30s, which I've not actually seen beginning to end. I need to do that.
I haven't either.
There's the one with George C. Scott. There's one with Patrick Stewart.
You mentioned Scrooge, right?
Yeah,
right.
There's one with Patrick Stewart who would actually make a good, I think, Scrooge too. So again,
Scrooge too.
Scrooge too.
Deck the halls too.
Do we really need that? I don't think we do.
Would
again,
that be the Richie Rich's
there is
Christmas
also
wish
like
of
the Christmas horror movie.
We get a lot more of that
we get
now.
More of that. And then even Violent Night, which we kind of want to see, which is like kind of I think an interesting idea of like making Santa Claus like an action hero. Like
so it's literally Die Hard, sort of.
Yeah. So we might report on that if we end up seeing it.
I have a machine gun. A mother F. Yeah.
Any other final thoughts?
No. This movie's god awful.
So don't watch it.
No. Well, I actually don't.
Normally we'd say, "Oh, check it out."
No,
you're good.
No, Christmas with the Cranks. I'd say lightly check that out if you haven't seen it. I think there's some interesting aspects of that.
If you haven't seen Deck the Halls in a while or at all, just be fine with the trailer music we played. Don't subject yourself to any more of it.
No.
But two things I would subject yourself to. Well, Jeff Probst, what have we got next week?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
Here he comes now, the big hand.
I'm Mr. White Christmas. I'm Mr. Snow. I'm Mr. Icicle. I'm Mr. Ten Below. Friends call me Snow Miser. Whatever I touch turns to snow in my clutch. I'm too much.
He's Mr. White Christmas. He's Mr. Snow. He's Mr. Icicle. He's Mr. Ten Below.
Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and next year and the year after that. I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet, and I'm going to see the world. Italy, Greece, the Parthenon, the Colosseum. Then I'm coming back here and go to college and see what they know. And then I'm going to build things. I'm going to build airfields. I'm going to build skyscrapers 100 stories high. I'm going to build bridges a mile long. Well, you going to throw a rock? Hey, that's pretty good. What'd you wish, Mary?
Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight?
Dance by the light of the moon. What'd you wish when you threw that rock?
Oh, no.
Come on, tell me.
If I told you, it might not come true.
What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. I'll give you the moon, Mary.
I'll take it. Then what?
Well, then you could swallow it, and it'd all dissolve, see? And the moonbeams would shoot out of your fingers and your toes and the ends of your hair. Am I talking too much?
Yes. Why don't you kiss her instead of talking her to death?
How's that?
Why don't you kiss her instead of talking her to death?
Want me to kiss her, huh?
Oh, youth is wasted on the wrong people.
So those two clips you heard from are from The Year Without a Santa Claus, which is a first for Overlapping Dialogue. Not exactly a movie, but a Christmas special.
Yeah, TV.
TV special.
Mm-hmm.
And It's a Wonderful Life, arguably, probably not inarguably, the most iconic film Christmas story of all.
It's a Wonderful Life will not be shown this year. In its place is the following.
Yeah. So and we were talking about this just the other day. One thing I really love about The Year Without a Santa Claus, which I watched a lot growing up, is, and again, I love a lot of the Rankin Bass specials.
Yeah.
I mean, Frosty, that's one we always watch every year.
Yeah.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which I like, but there are some random mean-spirited aspects too.
So also, just in general, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story is a total fraud. I always tell my kids whenever I'm teaching about the Navajo Code Talkers, I'm like, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Navajo Code Talkers, totally marginalized and hated upon until their talent could be exploited. I mean, literally, it's like, and that whole story of Rudolph is so disingenuous I could spit. Like, it makes me so genuinely angry. Which is funny of how good the little special is, actually.
No,
by
I mean,
the way, but
the animation really well done, and I love that.
But no, there are some genuinely mean-spirited aspects of that movie. I mean, my friend Ryan, if you're listening, hello, used to always talk about his family laughing about how he's like, how when it's learned that he does have the red nose, you know, that he has the red nose, that Santa's like, oh, can't deal with that. He'd better fix that if he wants to be on my team someday. Just like how much of a total a-hole Santa Claus is. It's just like literally
Something
insane.
else we quote from that is eat Santa,
eat
mama.
Yeah.
I think,
and that part when like the sorry, I don't want to talk about this the whole time, but that part where the trainer guy sees that he has the red nose, he's like, no, and his eyes go crazy.
So
anyway,
and again, you know, we
and
also,
Here Comes Peter Cottontail. We're also fans of. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Really like Frosty. Frosty Returns. Maybe we'll find a chance to talk about that at some point. We need to watch the whole thing beginning to end again.
You know what's so funny about that too is it's like with Frosty, you had Jimmy Durante, which is just weird enough as it is of Frosty the Snowman. Frosty the Snowman. If you get that reference, then you know. But anyway, and then that like Jonathan Winters is the guy they go to,
which we love.
Well, I love him more than I love Jimmy Durante, but it's just like Jonathan Winters in this, like
random.
I don't know. Anyway,
but I think there's
a whole consumerist aspect to the Frosty Returns that's not really there in the first one, by the way, that I find fascinating.
Would anybody argue with me if I just said that it's kind of the law that Charlie Brown Christmas is the best special? I think most people would probably just say, yeah, okay, sure. I
remember liking Santa Claus is Coming to Town for
good.
many years,
but I mean, the thing I really love about Charlie Brown Christmas is that it's like, no, we are going to make this more about Christ. I mean, more out in the open.
I feel like that is like the anti-consumerist message that we've all been preaching for years, and that was the first major thing to really do that on television, like you know, in a big way. But yet we haven't lived up to that, and it's just kind of like, I mean, I feel like that is literally the most influential TV special ever, maybe, like as far as like that. There, I mean, and I mean, that's very clearly, I feel like, the clear divide and the line in the sand about Christmas is the secular and the Christian, and like where that meets and where that divides. I feel like that's literally the thing. And so, and it's the same thing kind of what we've been saying about these other things about people get all into making the play and doing all these things, but then they don't care about what the play's about or what Christmas is or you know. So all that's to say that, by the way, then there's You're Without Santa Claus, which, like we were talking about earlier, is like one of the only ones of these to be truly an original story of whatever this is.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an adaptation of a song or an adaptation of something else, that it's like just kind of like, oh, here's an original story, and which I think is a very clever one of what happens if Santa can't, be doing it this year. And
what if he can't deal? I mean,
And I feel like the most iconic things to come from this are the snow and the heat miser. I mean,
come on, sing. I mean,
come on, louder.
Come on, sing your heart out.
But I grew up watching this quite a bit on VHS, and we watched it for the first time again in quite a few years last year.
Last year was that?
Last
when it was?
year,
Okay,
I think it was.
Remember.
And I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is really good again. So I was happy about that.
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, we're going to talk about this at length next week. I mean, again, that as a metaphor for the holiday season and everything wrapped up in that movie is very weighty.
I mean, and I don't even say this lightly either. That's literally one of the most influential movies ever, of even just the idea of what if I didn't exist.
There have been a lot of movies that have aped that.
Yeah, I mean, and that whole idea of how does that affect the world that you are not in it, like, and
somebody who's like,
kind of similar to A Christmas Carol in its own way, I think.
And I feel like it's like a semi-hip thing to say in recent years, which is really stupid. Actually, it's like, actually, this movie's pretty screwed up when you really think about it. It's like, it's always been that way. It was that way in 1946 when it came out.
A man that literally is contemplating suicide, that's a whole part of the movie. I mean, yeah.
And it's not even unspoken, I would say. Well, it is officially unspoken, but everybody just knows it if you're paying attention and thinking about it. When this movie came out in 1946 is right obviously after the Second World War. Frank Capra had, of course, made some really big movies before his service during World War II, but then came back, and this was kind of his first really big movie after he was back, and the same really with, I think, Jimmy Stewart as well. And these are not exactly the same creative people as they once were before the war. I mean, Stewart very famously flew a lot of missions during World War II, bombing missions. Capra didn't necessarily serve on the front lines, but he definitely saw and was privy to a lot of the horrors of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's and the movie more explicitly deals with the Depression, the Great Depression, than it does World War II. But I feel like the after effects of those real world things hang over that movie like a dark cloud that is very clearly about those things at that time. And again, I think that movie was a fairly decent sized success when it came out, but has over the years only grown in time, and is frankly probably for a lot of families one of the first black and white movies that kids see maybe as a younger age. Obviously, Wizard of Oz has its sepia tone moments, but is mostly a color film. But that's probably one of the biggest, most widely seen classic Hollywood movies for that very reason of its connection to the Christmas season.
This is a little off topic, but I want to talk a little bit about the scene that we used. Is so great. It's like actually maybe one of the best movie scenes now I'm thinking about that I've thought of in a while, of like them talking about what are you wishing for to do with your life, and that they're literally throwing rocks at like an old house. Right. And this whole idea of like, I don't even know how to put it into words, but I feel like there's just such a powerful metaphor about like dreams and but then there's literally this house that was once someone else's dream, and they're like destroying it and saying here's what my dream is. And like, not even that's inherently a bad thing that they're doing that, but just kind of I guess the nature of life about dreams and the life not lived, and what will my life be, and how could things have been different. And that movie's mostly told in retrospective kind of view. And even that last kind of moment of it where the man's like, just kiss her already, and he's like, youth is wasted on the wrong people, and just like that man having lived his life and recognizing the futility of life and how the dreams that he lost, and there's just a lot of random, but in a pretty funny scene, a lot of really specific, random, very sobering ideas, which is ultimately what's so great about Frank Capra, I think, is that he was just came very natural to him.
Well, and his movies got probably in his movies over the years have been criticized for being too sentimental. A lot of things people said about him they've since said about Spielberg, but Spielberg has now since entered a zone of, he's been around so long that he now is an institution that, like him or hate him, you have to respect Spielberg nonetheless, and we certainly love him. But he's in a similar, he was criticized for similar things that Spielberg was early in his career. But there is a world wariness and a sobering, depressive atmosphere of that movie that was not present in Capra movies prior to the Second World War, and so that very clearly
because even
changed.
Even something like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which I feel like is very similar in some of its like just tone of what it's going for, is still always hopeful about itself. And like, even when the character is doing the filibuster stuff and he's like exhausted, there's always still this whole attitude of, no, I will continue on. There's literally a point in this movie where it's like, no, I will not continue.
Well, I will not do it.
Right. And
there's that one scene that we've talked about a lot of when Jimmy Stewart's kind of just sitting at the bar, and there's a level of angst that he's kind of putting on screen that you had not really seen necessarily in classic Hollywood movies.
And I will say, when I watched that movie for the first time, it wasn't the end of the movie where I teared up. It wasn't a positive moment. In that scene, I literally started crying, like genuinely. When that scene, that's one of the most affecting scenes of any movie I've ever seen, of just like the just emotional devastation of that. So yeah, like I said, I don't think we had seen a movie like that before that to do so, and I think that's why it remains such a holiday classic of the realities of that and the way people feel at Christmas, but ultimately it redeems all that.
Well, it also explicitly deals in the supernatural,
right? Yes,
more explicitly than some other movies do of the holiday season.
So all that's just to preview and say I'm glad we're doing 2 good movies.
Yeah, we're finally back to doing some good movies because the recent run we've had.
Oh my god! Like Deck the Halls specifically is just oh my god. Yeah, I want to deck somebody's halls. That's all I have to say about that.
One last thing too, just to think of, just one last epilogue, and we'll probably talk about this a little more next week. Jimmy Stewart, Jimmy Stewart's screen persona also started to change pretty significantly after his service in World War II. As that, when you think about him after that, all the Hitchcock movies he was in, and that those more explicitly dealt with, especially Vertigo as the ultimate capstone, is like him playing a lot darker characters. And he's still...
And even Harvey, where he's kind of like lost his mind, or even The Naked Spur, and some of those...
so that era of Jimmy Stewart, and this is kind of a bridge between the Jimmy Stewart of, like, say, Philadelphia Story versus the Jimmy Stewart of Vertigo, it's like building towards that. And so just... and again, I'm honestly glad we're just going to dip into the world of classic Hollywood for a little bit, too, because... we've been doing a lot more relatively modern movies, so it's good to go back for a little while. Back when movies were king.
Yeah, back when movies were good.
This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.
Who's your daddy?